Testing. Is that my welcome, was it?
That was that was your welcome. That was your applause. Welcome back to the JLL Coaching Pod. First episode with a guest. Thank you, Pat, for coming in. Really appreciate that. Today we're just going to talk about coaching and everything like that. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. So you just told me you've done a pod before.
Yes. So I was kind of co-host back in Hong Kong. Go a bit closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was co-host back in Hong Kong. So when I was working out in Coastal Fitness, it was called, and myself and my boss, Ed Haynes, he'd been doing this podcast for almost 100 episodes when I came onto it. And the first episode was about meditation. So I'd been doing quite a bit of meditation at the time, and he was like, oh, it'd be cool to have that as something that you're like quite passionate talking about. So I did that, and then the response from it was good. How I came across was good, and they were like, why don't you do more pods with us? And I was like, yeah, cool. So I did, and we ended up doing maybe like total 50 to, I don't know how many exactly, but like it was really good. Yeah, so I had hosts on that I had a host on that I had contacted. We had all sorts of topics. We did like nutrition series. We did just like very casual catch-ups with my boss, which was good. Like, he's someone that I still very much hold in high regard, and it was just nice to kind of like do this basically where you just have no interruptions and you're just chatting face to face for like an hour and a half about life or training or whatever. And he was a very deep thinker, so I felt like we could just kind of really go for it in terms of getting vulnerable or whatever, and I just love doing that. So
mate, that is excellent. I think I want to hear about why you got into coaching, but first I'd love to hear, why did you start lifting?
I started lifting to get girls.
Fuck
yeah. So and then when you do that, you realize that it has very little correlation to it, and you're just getting like recognition from other blokes. So yeah, well, I was probably like 14, 15. I remember watching Twilight with my girlfriend at the time, and Jacob, like, not you,
No.
Taylor Lautner with his rig out, and my girlfriend just like absolutely frothing, loving it, and just being like, fuck, I need to get bigger, I need to like grow my traps, I need to like build some pipes or whatever. So that was my intention there, was to be sort of like admired more by the girls. At the same time, there was kind of an element of me wanting to get bigger for rugby. So I remember I was quite small when I was in like year 5 up to like year 9, year 10. I was quite late having a growth spurt. So I felt like I was getting run over a lot. I used to be absolutely nails at like tackling when I was in like year 5, year 6. I used to just like put my head anywhere, and then I became an absolute pussy from like year 7, year 8. I just hated tackling, and
Don't blame me.
So I just became. I was like, I need to get bigger and stronger to be able to not be a pussy, basically. So those are my kind of reasons for getting into it. And then I started, as you do, you get the bug, and then you're like, oh, I want to learn more about this so that I can get better at it myself. Like, how can I kind of hack the system a bit, and like, oh, what's this Men's Health article saying? What's this bodybuilding.com saying? What's Steve Cook vlogging about? Like, Rob Riches, those are the people that like I kind of remember first following in the industry. So was doing a lot of what they did, like Mike O'Hearn's Power Bodybuilding. Like, those are the classic programs that I used to run back when I was like 16, 17. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into lifting and why I started doing it. It was very much aesthetics based. Didn't really train legs much, even though like I knew that I had to do it for rugby or whatever. So, and then that's how I started. And then do you want me to kind of keep going as to how it evolved?
Mate, let's go. Yeah.
So then went to uni and did sports science. So I kind of had a dream when I went from school into uni. what I thought I was going to be was a PE teacher. Like I always admired my PE teachers at school. Like they were very cool guys. Like they looked like they had an easy life, like just like kicking a ball around, like messing around with the kids kind of thing, not in a sexy way. And it just looked like good fun. So that was what I wanted to do. And I thought going and doing like sports science at uni and then going into that would be what I would do.
Yeah.
And then when I got to uni, I kind of like started to love S and C in general, and was like, oh, actually, like going and like being a strength and conditioning coach for like a rugby team or something like that. Like my dream job was to be head of strength and conditioning at Bath Rugby.
Okay.
And I remember when I was at school, actually, there was a guy who came and did a talk who was a strength and conditioning coach for like, he'd been a S&C coach for Australia rugby for a couple, like he had this amazing CV of like all these teams, and it just looked like an unbelievable job to like be working with elite athletes and being in the gym with them. That was kind of like my goal. And then I found CrossFit. And
whilst you're at uni?
Whilst I was at uni, yeah. Okay. So first year of uni, I was pretty chubby. Like, you know, that you add on that beer stone of like just drinking all the time.
Still lifting, but like, again, bro, like chest and tries, back and bias type thing. Did you, so at the start of your like lifting career, did you ever dive into like the scientific point of view, or was it mainly Men's Health, Steve Cook, Michael Hearn? Did you ever go like Eric Helms, the hypertrophy pyramid?
No. Okay. Yeah. So that never reached me. I have looked at Eric, have come across Eric Helms since.
Yes.
But that's not what I was following for a while. It was very much sort of like face value, like basic bitch bodybuilding, and like it wasn't very advanced.
Was it? Did you get your info mainly from magazines then, or was it still
Men's Health
and the actual magazines themselves?
Yeah, literally the magazines themselves. Like I used to, when I was like, I'm talking 16, 17. How old are you?
28.
Yeah, I'm 31. So a little bit more that, I guess, like it was pre-YouTube era kind of thing. There weren't many people. You
just missed it, I think, because I started lifting at about 14.
Yeah.
And that's when YouTube was kind of starting to get a little taste. Like Hodge Twins, did you watch them?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
So they were out there and they were becoming sciencey by the time I was 15 and you were 18.
Yeah. Yeah, so mainly it was Men's Health, bodybuilding.com, those kind of things. Yeah, so then at uni, then started doing CrossFit because there was a CrossFit gym that opened in the university town that I was at. And he was a like semi-pro, well, he was pro, like Welsh Premiership rugby player. He'd played like, I think like Wales schoolboys, played for Neath, which is quite a well-respected like rugby team, rugby club in Wales. So he was pretty good. And he opened this gym as kind of like a side project because he'd had like fucking 3 knee surgeries and reconstructions or whatever. So he felt like he was probably like on the cusp of not being able to do it that much. Opened up this strength and conditioning facility called Atomic Fitness. And then realized that kind of like, this was 2012, 2013. So this was when CrossFit was like on its way up and was a cool, trendy thing to do. And
Rich
I think
Froning era.
Yeah, literally that was it. Yeah. So that was when it was on its way up, and the having a CrossFit affiliation was what brought publicity to you. It's a kind of a bit like an F45 in a way, where people will almost just Google F45 in an area to go to it. It's like they'll just Google CrossFit gym and it happened. They had affiliated. So anyway, started doing CrossFit there and loved it. And was like, oh wow. And at the time was a bit chubby and was starting to like, the weight was starting to come off. I started doing paleo and was
full in CrossFit.
I was balls deep in CrossFit.
Let's
like,
go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So started doing that. And then as I kind of became that guy that was just there the whole time, like didn't really leave, stopped going to lectures and was just training multiple times a day and just kind of like being amongst it. He kind of obviously, he saw my enthusiasm for it and was like, why don't you come and do some part-time coaching. I did my level 1 CrossFit, which is like not worth the paper it's printed on, but
was it bad?
Well, it's just, I mean, it's fine, but it's like, it's their way of doing stuff, which is just, it is what it is.
What is it? 10 pillars of fitness or something? 7 pillars of fitness? That kind of vibes.
I actually don't know how. Couldn't tell you. I know they've got like 7 or 8 like functional movement patterns that they teach, and then they drill you through that, and then you go through. It's like their nutrition prescription. Like it's good basics, but like yeah. So
just quickly, mate, when you were starting out with your lifting, how were your results? You said you were a little bit chubby, but did you get stronger? Did you build muscle?
I definitely got bigger. Yeah, for sure.
Was it a good period of training? Like, do you remember like where your weights went from and went to, like body weight and like lifts?
I didn't start being super diligent. Like I didn't have all the data. Like I wasn't like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this properly. It was kind of like 2-3 days a week. So we had a gym at the school, and it was like, the moment I knew that the moment that I got into year 10 I could use the school gym, that was kind of like the cutoff point, that you weren't any time below that you weren't allowed to. So the moment I got into year 10 I joined the gym, and it was like going a little bit deeper. So like my mum and dad divorced when I was quite young, so I've always had this kind of like seeking male approval of like men older than me or people that I admire or aspire to be. And one of the ways that I filled that void was either by playing up to the boys that were older than me, either in the gym or like on like at like lunch break or whatever. Like I used to like run into the football pitch, or like in the sports hall when they were playing football, I would grab the football from them and then like kick it up into the squash court so they couldn't get it, and then like just flip them the bird and be like, what are you gonna do? And they're like, well, we're obviously gonna beat you up. So then I'd get like thrown in bushes and like, but it was like
wait, so that's how you looked up to them?
Yeah, it's weird. It's it was like it was seeking approval from my mates to be like, oh, Paddy doesn't give a fuck, he's like he'll do whatever sort of thing.
Yeah, but
also like that, it sounds really lame, but it's like I could like take a beating and I wouldn't dob sort of thing, so that's kind of like how it, and then in the gym was a similar thing, but in a different capacity, where it's like I can go and kind of hang out with the older boys and they can like see me as like above the other guys in my year because I want to train and like I'm like want to get into the gym, whatever. So
that's so cool to hear. So what age did they divorce, and what age, like, so you said year 10?
I was 4. Okay. So I like I've always had like a mum's house and a dad's house type thing.
Okay. Because I was thinking potentially like they divorced as you got access to the gym.
No.
It's just it wasn't a recipe for gains.
It's not like it's not like it was like mad trauma or anything like that. But it was just like something that I've realized over the years is that like my seeking of either attention or like male approval, I think, comes from that. And a lot of like where my fitness drive came from was with that. Like it was about like girls finding me more attractive, but it was also about like being considered macho or alpha, or like, oh, your pipe's looking big, like that. Like male approval was something that I kind of sought in a way. I remember like internally thinking in my head, like over summer, like I'm gonna get fucking huge over the next 8 weeks. I'm gonna smash like Maxi Muscle Cyclone and creatine, and I'm gonna come back and all the boys are gonna be like, fucking hell, you're so big, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, I am. So it's like that. I remember that narrative always being there.
Do you have a actual moment or experience where you had that lived? Or was it just the general kind of narrative?
No, I probably couldn't put one on, but like there's many times where like I remember I remember getting a compliment like that and being like it like filled me up sort of thing. So it's like, and obviously you try and play it down and you're like, yeah, cool, nice, cheers, man.
Inside jumping for joy.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're all riddled by our own insecurities anyway. So yeah. But yeah, that was a big driver for me, like trying to get into the school gym. And then like at uni it was the same. So like when I was in freshers, like I was playing rugby at uni, and it was like my goal to be like respected and liked by the boys in the years above me in the rugby club. So then it was like any means necessary, like anyone like who wants to go and do something loose? Like, should we dare someone to go and do this? Oh, Paddy will do it, type thing. So that was all, and that was always the narrative for like, or why I did a lot of things that I did.
And why? And you think that's because your parents separated when you were young?
Yeah, because I lived with my mum and not with my dad. I didn't have an older brother or a younger brother. I grew up with my mum and my sister. So there was a lot of like feminine energy. So then I felt like around other blokes, it was kind of like kind of pulled the trigger and was just a bit like, let's go mental. And was then seeking approval from them. So yeah. So that's kind of like the drivers. Anyway, going back to where I was at uni. So like that getting into CrossFit, that's how I started coaching, really, was by doing the part-time CrossFit stuff at CrossFit ABBA. And then as I went through my uni time, I cared less about my sports science degree and cared more about CrossFit. And at the time, it was less about coaching and it was about trying to be the best CrossFit athlete I could be. Mm-hmm. I'm not gifted with like a good squat. And CrossFit, so much of it is all just being like short femurs, like having a great squat. Are you like 5'2" and you like naturally have like a 200 kg back squat? If the answer is no, you're probably a bit fucked for CrossFit in most cases.
Yeah, you're too tall, right?
Yeah. So, and too like lanky. So, anyway, that was my driver. And then I went kind of balls deep into that realm of like, how can I learn more about gymnastics? How can I learn more about like endurance? How can I learn more about strength training to be a better CrossFit athlete? Which then allowed me to be a better coach because I understood things better. But I wasn't doing it because I was like, I can help people. I was doing it because I can help me.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I do remember like coaching classes, and I was talking about this the other day to Craig Massey, and we were talking about how we got into coaching and like our drivers and whatever. And I remember distinctly like wanting to learn about topics so that I could sound smarter. So like it was this kind of like, not necessarily like I told you so, but it was like I was right. Like people would come to me as a source of information and they saw me as intelligent as a coach. So I remember like wanting to research more about X or about Y within CrossFit or CrossFit coaching, so that in a class I could be like, oh, this is actually, you need to think about this because of that. And they're like, oh, okay, Paddy knows what he's talking about, sort of thing. And then when I finished uni, one of my schoolmates, he saw on my social media that I was doing CrossFit and was doing a bit of coaching. And we would always used to chat. He was one of those older boys that I used to train with in the gym and that I looked up to. He sent me a message on IG being like, oh, well, we were chatting and he was like, oh, we're actually looking for coaches. And he was out in the Middle East coaching in a CrossFit gym there. So he was like, if you fancy it, like, I can't remember if it was him saying that or if I was saying, do you have any jobs? I can't remember.
But just before you go in there, mate.
Yeah.
So when you were training at the CrossFit gym and doing your sports science degree, did you make connections from your degree to CrossFit? Were you using your degree to get better understanding of CrossFit, or did those paths not cross yet?
No, they're so far removed.
So did
Pointless. I've never used my degree. Really.
None of it. No. Did you get like a foundational understanding of traditional periodization or anything like that from it that you remember, or were you so in the CrossFit world that it was just like? Yeah,
no, I remember a little bit of there was some. I remember briefly touching on some linear periodization
and physiology, basics of physiology, biomechanics.
So but everything in biomechanics that I learned, I don't think I ever stuck, and all of the biomechanics that I've learned now has been off my own back in the last 3 or 4 years that I've kind of gone balls deep into that.
Yeah. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I don't feel like I really learned like even like nutrition models and modules and stuff like that. Like I said, at the time when I was at uni, I kind of almost wish I did it much later on in my life. It was uni was unreal. Like I loved it. Yeah, it was so sick. But from a social,
yeah,
and like having a sick time and like playing rugby and like training the time and like just getting loose or whatever. But
I think that's a mad thing about this country.
yeah, there's people you just go
The
to
uni
for,
is not, you're not there to learn or develop per se. I think
yeah.
that's very rare if that's the kind of thing you're doing when you're at uni. So I think that's like, do you think your university course was good? It was just you like getting distracted by these other awesome things in your life?
Yeah.
Or do you think the course could be better as well?
I think the course could have been better, but I do think that like it was the platform for you to be able to then go into your niche or the things that you enjoy, because ultimately like it's such a big topic. You have to be you have to be very broad with what you're doing. Are you good?
All good.
Yeah.
Yeah. My laptop just locked. I was like, oh
shit.
we're all good. It should be fine.
Yeah. So yeah, it had to be very broad. So it's then like there are going to be loads of things that you don't like. The exercise science stuff, like morbidity and mortality, is just like, I get it, but like I don't give a fuck about obesity rates. Like that's not why I'm here.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, but it was a good base, but nothing that I learned really I was able to apply. But had I been like, oh, I just want to learn, and maybe if I was paying for it myself, like off my own back, I'd be a lot more attentive and would have got a lot more out of it. But I was kind of like doing the bare minimum. Like I intentionally, like I had attendance meetings in first year, and I got 39, like the pass mark was 40%. I got 39%, like almost did like the bare minimum. Like I remember going to like exams like hungover as fuck. Like go. Having like I remember like there was one, it was a cardio respiratory exam, and I hadn't been to a single lecture in the entire thing, and I was sitting this exam, and I was like, I have no fucking idea what any of these questions are. I think I got like 30% from like just bantering.
Did you think you got a good basic fundamental understanding of science and what it is, and like the hierarchy of science and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think like being able to, it had to do, obviously a lot of what was involved is like literature reviews, so like reading papers, taking information from that. But even then, like I think that like where I am right now, I don't feel well educated enough to be able to take a piece of literature, read it properly, understand the limitations and what the paper has truly found. I think there are like so many evidence-based people in the fitness industry right now that are just literally reading abstracts. Like anyone can read an abstract. You haven't looked at the paper, and you haven't like understood the limitations or thought about like what further research or how that paper could be better. And I don't think I'm like, I would have to really go back into education to properly to be able to do that. So all I do in terms of taking research and literature is go from people that I think are credible sources of information that are more intelligent than I am, to be able to filter out whether they think this is a good paper or not. But at the same time, you can have two people that you think are well respected, and they could read the same paper and they think different things from it. So it's like, can't trust anyone. But yeah, no, I think my degree was like the life experience was invaluable, but the education from it wasn't that applicable.
So you say you're a young coach frothing to learn and dive into coaching. What would be your advice out of school? So you're 18.
Experience, and like just get hours under your belt. Like you'll learn more by doing. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that you need to. Like you could. I would say that going to university, like yes, if you want to rack up that much debt, then go for it. Or if your parents going to pay for it or whatever, like that's cool. And the life experience was amazing, and I wouldn't change any of that for the world. But if you're going purely to learn, I reckon either wait or just like figure it out yourself first. Because like right now, like think about when we first started lifting and trying to educate ourselves versus what's out there now, like podcasts, YouTube alone, those two sources of information are unreal. Instagram, unreal in terms of like the amount of education that's out there that's free. So it's like, you could just research the most in-depth, detailed pieces of information, and you could learn. You just got to find the right sources of information, or like some good sources of information. That's all you need to do.
How would you go around advising that young person to decide what's a good piece of information and what's a poor piece of information?
Try it and see if it works or not. Like I think, I don't know. Yeah, it's like there are so many people out there that you think are credible sources of information, and then they turn out not to be. Like, for example, someone that I used to obsess over, not obsess over, but like obsess over the information.
You were in love with them.
No, was Mike Israetel. I don't think I value Mike Israetel's opinion as much as I used to. And I guess that's because of some of the other sources of information that I found that talk about how Mike Israetel isn't putting out as much information. I don't necessarily think that I don't think he's doing it intentionally, like intentionally putting out bad information, but I just think that I don't know, maybe he's a little bit delayed. I don't know. Who am I? He's much more intelligent than I am. But like from my experience, like I think that there are better people out there that you could be learning about, like some of the stuff that he talks about.
So I think when you're learning, you're always trying to find value.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the purpose of learning.
Yeah.
From my perspective. So how do you go around deciphering what is valuable from what you've learned? Do you have a process, a feeling? You just said you used to really like Mike Israetel's stuff,
Yeah.
but now you think some of this stuff is not kind of where it should be. What's your process of figuring out that value?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I have like a process around it. It was just where I'll take a piece of information and then I'll think about whether I think that makes sense or not, I guess. So like I think I have the luxury now of having been in it for over 10 years of trying to essentially nerd out on gym and unlocking or trying to find hacks or whatever, you know, and you can sniff out whether that sounds like bullshit or not. And I guess taking things with a pinch of salt as well is like not being bought into whatever it is that you're hearing and thinking that that's gospel, like always almost holding back a little bit and being like, well, this is something that someone's saying, this might be correct, but also like for example, a year ago I was frothing over like length and position, everything, like length and partials, length and position, etc., etc. And now it seems that there's studies that are coming out that there are certain muscle groups that don't respond well to training or overloading the length and position or length and partials or anything like that. So, and that's something that like Mike Israetel, for example, was frothing over, and then therefore I was frothing over. I think it's just maybe taking into consideration, or like trying to not necessarily be polarizing with it, and thinking that there's only one system or there's only one way of doing something, and this might make sense. Let's try it. Let's implement it to either myself or to other people and see how it goes. For example, like something currently I'm doing is like my not even set volume, but rep volume for building muscle is right down. Like I'm talking like 4 to 10 reps max for sets for hypertrophy. Whereas like I'd be like, okay, maybe for like the bigger compound lifts, we might have lower reps. And then for like the single joint exercises, we might do high reps because whatever, like it's hard to find a heavy 8 on a lateral raise, but you still can do it. And yeah, those are things that I would have probably heard information a year or two ago and been like, this is the only way to do it, and thinking that there's you're bought into that idea, when all I would say is if you think that a piece of information is valuable, is to just go with it but not be obsessed with it or bought into it, and then think that that's the only way that you can do X or Y or whatever.
So it sounds like, and this is going to be hard for a young coach, but it sounds like your wealth of experience is the main net that you are trickling all this information down through.
Because you've been burnt before, right? where you've been like, oh, this is how you do it, and then turns out it's probably not. And we're constantly finding new research and whatever. So it's like, who knows what the most optimal way of building muscle is going to be. Like, the way that I think about this now is like, what is quotations hybrid, the optimal way of hybrid training going to look like in 5 years? Because it's not new, but it kind of is new, and there's a lot more people doing this hybrid way of training where they're trying to be really strong and they're trying to be really fit. And the more people that do that and the more trendy it becomes, the more research and more people will obsess over it, and will be able to find out a bit more of like whether this makes sense or whether this is the best way to train, or whereas right now it's kind of us figuring it out.
Just going to restart the video. I think that's okay. Pause. So I love how much you've been through the weeds, and hypertrophy is like the main thing I think you have a lot of knowledge about. That's kind of your thing. That's what you do for March on the main program online for them. So do you, when you go about putting together your opinions on what's optimal, what's better or worse for training, do you have principles that you've written down or that you've thought about that kind of underpin your decision making when it comes to your programming, a day-by-day session, this kind of thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a principle, but well, yeah, maybe it is a principle. It's like the program that I write is the game program on March On, and it's the goal is for people to be as strong as they can in key lifts, to be as muscular as they can, and for them to be fit at the same time. So could do fast 5Ks, rip a 2K row, etc., etc. So like my identity of what hybrid would be. So someone that looks class, is strong as fuck, and is fit as well, rather than just being muscle bound, just being really strong, looking like a bag of dicks, can't run a 5K, whatever it is. So like that's the goal, is to try and have someone who's well rounded in those specialisms. I guess it is hybrid in a way. So I then kind of have these buckets where like I keep the strength very strength. So it's like powerlifting principles of squat, bench, deadlift, variations of. The bodybuilding is very much bodybuilding principles of lots of stability, maximizing strength profiles, setups, rep ranges or sets and reps and reserve prescriptions that allow for that. And then the conditioning is very much conditioning in isolation, as a rower would do rowing intervals, as a runner would do running intervals for a 10K race. So it's like those, I guess those are the three principles, and they're very separate. So it's like part A and maybe part B is your key strength bits, and then the rest of that session is probably going to be like very much bodybuilding specific. And then Wednesday, for example, midweek would be just conditioning. I don't blend any of it together, really, with the intention of trying to get the most out of each of those elements rather than trying to kind of do all of it all at once.
So you have these objective outcomes that you're looking for: strength, hypertrophy, and some cardiovascular fitness.
Yeah.
If you were to zoom back for me and think about the adaptations you're looking for and what drive them with regards to how are they building muscle? What is the leading principle behind that adaptation? How are we developing hypertrophy? That kind of thing. Have you gone down that path of figuring out principles? So for me, I maybe should clarify, because for me, a principle is something that is more likely true than not true.
Yeah.
And I say it like that because I don't think we have any of the answers, and I think we're all wrong. Yeah. But you could say it in a more simple way. A principle is something that's universally true. That's how you could say it. So it's like gravity exists.
Yeah. Okay.
That's more likely true than not true.
Yeah.
for example, with regards to training, it could be something like the principle of specificity. That could be one of the principles that you use to drive these adaptations for strength, hypertrophy, or cardiovascular fitness.
I guess that ultimately is specificity within each of those specialisms, rather than, like what I said, rather than trying to like blend between the two, where it's like, you know, power bodybuilding, trying to mix them together. It's like the strength elements are very specific to strength, the hypertrophy very specific to hypertrophy. But so then what I would say is like the principles behind each of those are that the strength will be very much low rep ranges, rep maxes, back offsets, like accumulating volume over a block, building like very linear, like higher repetitions, lower fatigue or lower overall stress, building to lower volume within the strength work and higher intensity, building up or trying to peak towards a test or some form of a key performance metric. Then for the bodybuilding, it will be either compound or single joint exercises working within close proximity to failure, for a given amount of effective reps. And then for the conditioning, it will be really what I'm kind of figuring out right now is that at the moment, a lot of these blocks, if you want a change within a short period of time, it always has to be the punchy like intervals that are going to create that change, when actually we know that like long lasting fitness comes from building an aerobic base. But if you've got 8 weeks or you've got 10 weeks to peak for a 2K row, like the way that I program the intervals is the best way to do that, because then in another block's time they're going to be doing a different test. So it's almost like that's a necessary evil. But if I wanted you to do your best 2K row in the next 6 months, we probably wouldn't be doing any punchy stuff for the first 3 of that, and it would all just be base building. So I guess that's a principle as well. You're
quite constrained, I think, with the program, with just like, I imagine.
Yeah.
What are your constraints with your program?
Yeah, well, it's tough because you're trying to cater to a lot of people. Like there's about 1,000 people on Gain, so
which is mad.
Yeah, it's a lot of people
I think you program probably for the most people in the UK. I would guess there might be someone like Jeff Nippard or Renaissance Periodization, who has these general outlines and apps that might be more, but with regards to the exact program, I'd probably say you are programming for more people in the UK than anyone else.
I'm trying to think of who else would be. We'll take it.
Fucking take it. You're doing a good job. Take it for sure.
So yeah, because
big responsibility on those shoulders.
It is. So it's like, so if you think about where like the march on programs are, Gain is one of several programs. So then I almost have to identify within that bracket. So like there are times when I would be like, I would like to kind of delve into more GPP and like, let's develop some power on this block. And we'll do like some like plyometrics, we'll do some power cleans, whatever. But that's probably not going to fit. That's not fitting within that bracket of what we're trying to do, which is like bodybuilding and strength and conditioning or hybrid, whatever. So ultimately, the majority of the people that are coming onto Gain are there because they want to change their body composition, but also be a bit stronger and a bit fitter as well.
Yeah.
So it's trying to like tick all those boxes at the same time. And then the train program is very similar to the Gain program, but the way that you get there is slightly different. So it's more functional training that will still allow you to build muscle and get stronger and get fitter, but you might be doing more like mixed modal stuff. You might be doing more like, instead of us doing a like a high incline Smith machine or like barbell strict press, they're going to be doing like a half kneeling kettlebell press. Like quotation's more functional. Like it's just, you have more carryover to other things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's is it more functional? Maybe having more muscle is more functional. That's like another topic. But yeah, so it's like trying to fit within those brackets. And if I fuck around too much with trying different things, it sometimes can result in engagement drop off. And
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
so it's like
That's
there's an
interesting.
element of retention that I have to consider with the program as well,
Absolutely.
and also thinking about where the demographic is, because a lot of our paid marketing on social media funnels people into the gain program.
Mm.
So then the I don't know how much experience you've got with paid marketing, but they're typically
Zero.
they're very like this. It's the same for us in the gym at March on Stratford, but also online where it's their training age is low. So it's like if I'm talking about reps in reserve, drop back off sets, having done rep maxes over the last 6 months, whatever, these people haven't done that before. They've been messing around with like a 3 sets of 10 on
Yeah.
any machine that they can see in Pure Gym. So it's like, yeah, you have to be considerate of where everyone is. It's tough.
I think there is so much valuable stuff to get out of you with regards to like the business side of running this program with 1,000 people following, which is insane.
Yeah.
But for now, I think I'd like to save it for later. For now, what I'm super curious about is within those three buckets that you're driving with the train program: strength, hypertrophy, cardiovascular fitness. For strength, what drives those adaptations?
Movement quality, intensity, ultimately, or like waves of intensity and accumulation. Yeah, I mean, that's like if you're going into a more deeper sort of like physiological like perspective, it's ultimately there needs to be some muscle mass there in order for you to be able to recruit. But the more that I the more that I do strength training and the more that I program strength training, like as long as there's some muscle there, you probably can get more out of it rather than you needing to build more muscle to get stronger. Like you look at these like scrawns in powerlifting that like have got no quads or no glutes or whatever, and they can rip out like a 200 plus back squat, and it's just like movement efficiency or like what's going on within the muscle, like how well trained they are, the skill of the movement, how neurologically wired their neural drive within that movement pattern matters probably more than like have they got loads of muscle tissue. And like the younger me would have been like, oh, those bodybuilders have just got their muscles are filled with water. It's not that their muscles are filled with water, it's that they just haven't necessarily wired those pathways within the muscle to be able to contract as specifically as a powerlifter or a strength trained athlete would. So I guess the principle then is getting under heavy load and your movement efficiency, and you trying to repeat that pattern as much as possible so that you can squeeze out as much juice out of every rep as you can.
So would you say fundamentally it's like how much muscle they have alongside these other factors of leverages?
I think leverages has a huge, like, people, I don't think people realize that, like, you and I are like basically the same height, right? So it's probably not the same, but like if we take someone who's like 5'7", a 5'7" guy who weighs 80 kg and I weigh like 93, 94 kg, and they have, their femurs are like 6 inches shorter than mine. The amount of extra load that I essentially have to lift with the same amount of weight being on the bar is mad, and people don't think about that. It's the same with like a deadlift or like an RDL, for example. Like my RDL position, like I almost feel like I'm cheating. I haven't got like a huge RDL or anything, but like I look at my RDL from side on, and my arms are so long, and my hips stay so high, and I can touch the floor with the barbell really easily. and it feels like I've barely taken my hammies or my glutes through that much range of motion. Whereas like my squat, it feels like I'm like squatting down into a cave. So people don't like think about the leverages, but the leverages have a massive role to play on it. And I think genetics really ultimately come down to it. But like that's all well and good saying that, but like you can change your genetics in a way, and you can not out train it, but like you can do a lot with shit genetics.
Yeah, fully. So one guy I look up to a lot in particular is Pat Davidson, and for him he describes strength as predominantly being limited by cross-sectional area of muscle tissue.
Interesting.
And I think that's quite an interesting way to look at strength. And I think generally you can find a direct correlation with how much muscle tissue someone has and how strong they are.
Yeah.
And just I remember you've made content on the cardiovascular health pyramid. You could almost look at it as though that muscle tissue cross-sectional area is the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And like your leverage is already set. You're not going to really change your bone length, but you can change your neural drive. You can change like how much sleep you've had, all these other things on top of the pyramid. What's your perspective on that?
I think that's an obvious answer. Maybe not to some people, but I think that like it's a bit like the comment of like if you hear hooves and you don't think zebras, it's like if you see someone with big muscles, you're like, I expect them to be strong. It's like that's almost obvious. But I guess my point there was that like I know plenty of people that have got significantly more muscle tissue than me and are weaker, and I know a lot of people that have got a lot less muscle tissue than me and are much stronger. So it's not as simple as like more muscle equals you're definitely stronger. I think that particularly once you have a certain training age, there's then going back to that specificity where if I'm doing sets of 8 on the hack squat versus me doing sets of 5 on the back squat, like I'm going to get different outcomes from that. And like, yeah, I can build some tissue from doing sets of 5 on the back squat, but like I'll probably build more tissue by doing sets of 8 on the hack squat. Excuse me. And yeah, it's like I don't think it's not as simple as just because you've got more muscle, you're stronger. I do think that there's definitely a correlation between the two, but I'd say that's kind of the obvious answer, but maybe it's not that obvious.
So I think with regards to individuals, so like I can't compare how strong I am to you because there's so many unknown factors that can influence it. But for me personally, I think the biggest driving factor of me getting stronger is building more muscle tissue. That would be my philosophy with regards to if you want to get stronger, I think you need to build more cross-sectional muscle tissue as an individual across a population. I think that will be the biggest driver. And then on top of that, you'll develop more neurons. You'll get better at the particular skill or the lift that to drive that strength outcome. So for me, I think there's a lot of crossover and carryover between strength and hypertrophy.
Yeah, I completely agree. But like all I was saying is like that I think that's obvious. And I think that I would just say that there are definitely exceptions to that rule, rather than it being as simple as like the only way that you can get stronger is you just need to be bigger, when that's not always the case. And you can have people that stay, again, not necessarily referring always back to elite sport, but like you can have people that stay in the same weight category for their entirety of their athletic career and continue to get stronger. Have they built any more muscle? Maybe not. They might have just kind of rewired themselves differently.
Yeah, these are, and again, I think a big problem with this is quantifying it, because does body composition change even though they're in the same weight category? Are they building more muscle tissue and losing more fat? Is that why they're in the same weight category? Again, there's a lot of factors, but I think that's something that's relatively easy to measure with regards to a program over time. Like, you can see if someone's building muscle, they'll generally get stronger in the rep range of 6 to 30.
Yeah.
If other factors are consistent, which you're probably trying to do if you're trying to build muscle over time.
Yeah.
So saying that, we've spoken about strength. What differs with regards to these strength outcomes that you're looking for when you are programming for hypertrophy?
I think I think it's very hard to communicate to people that there is a difference between the two. Like, I would almost argue that, like, or the way that I'm thinking about it at the moment, and this is obviously subject to change, but the way that I think about it at the moment is like, in in a hypertrophy, with the intention being a hypertrophic stimulus, you're thinking about what you can get out of that session on that day. Whereas I think the strength you have to have more consideration as to where it is in relation to the program that you're trying to peak for. And obviously, if you talk about like the specifics of the bodybuilding as a sport, there are obviously going to be peaking phases for competitions, etc., etc. Like, are you on a gaining phase? Are you on a blast with your hormones that you're putting, or are you on a maintenance phase, or whatever it is? But the I don't necessarily think that the training intensity of hypertrophy has as much impact on your ability to be able to continue to progress over a training block versus strength. So when you think about the goal is of, and I'm kind of figuring this out as I'm saying it, right? But when you think about the goal of with hypertrophy, is that you're just trying to create the stimulus at that exact time, whereas strength, it's not necessarily about trying to get the most rep max on that day. It's like, how can you continue to build and progress that skill over an 8 or a 10 or a 12 or a 16 week block. So it's like the strength training has to be more zoomed out, and you want to manage your intensity and the stress over that training block a lot more than potentially in a hypertrophy block. Obviously, there's going to be stress that will impact your ability to build muscle, and you have to be considerate of, like, if you do loads of forced reps, or you absolutely send it on a hack squat, that's going to impact your ability to hit the next session. And you can adjust your reps and reserve prescriptions, and there's obviously going to be a progression over a 10, 12, 16 week hypertrophy block that you might do. But I think that the main difference is understanding where the strength is in relation to where you're trying to peak, versus hypertrophy. You could probably be a little bit less in tuned on that, and more about you're trying to create the response on that day. That would be the difference between the two.
So let me just try and understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So would you say then generally the difference between hypertrophy and strength is the time frame?
No.
So you I'll just say this because you said with regards to hypertrophy, you're looking for a stimulus on that day, whereas with strength, you zoomed out and looked at a different time period.
Yeah. I think it's like with hypertrophy, there's not necessarily, for us anyway, not taking steroids, like, your rate of muscle gain is so slow. It's like it just almost has to be a constant. It's not like you're going through like blast phases and maintenance phases, or I think it's almost like you just have to continually, slowly move the needle forward each week, each month, each year. Whereas with strength, if you're a little bit, it has to be specific to a point that you're trying to work up towards. It doesn't have to be, but if you want to get the most out of your strength, I think you have to be a lot more planned and strategic with where you're starting, how that progression is going to look like. Whereas if you're thinking about the stimulus for hypertrophy, it's like 1 week you might do 8 reps, and then the next week you might do 10 reps on the same weight. Whereas if you were trying to peak for strength, you probably wouldn't do that, because you're trying to work up to a 1 rep max back squat. You probably wouldn't want to do sets of 8 and then go back to sets of 10 the following week, you would probably be wanting to continually add load to the bar to get to a point where you're able to express a 1.
This is interesting, actually, because I would disagree there.
Okay.
I would disagree there because of... Have you looked into John Kiley's work?
No, who's that?
John Kiley is a sports scientist. He's worked with loads of rugby teams, boxers, and he's done a lot of work critiquing traditional periodization. And the example I would give is why I don't necessarily agree with that is because generally we are looking for, say you are powerlifting, and we use that as an example of strength. Squat, bench, and deadlift. Those 3 lifts within the regulations of normal powerlifting. Traditional point of view, and tell me if you're wrong, you would go along it with this linear progression, reducing the reps, upping the load towards competition, pull back the week or 2 before, and then peak. So the issue with that approach is there are differences amongst individuals which are unknown that can lead to that kind of linear progression approach not having the best outcome. Now, what I'm trying to say, to be more direct and give an example, there are some powerlifters that never go below 8 reps in all of their training up until competition day. And they are some of the best powerlifters in the world because they've figured out that's what works best for them. And my philosophy is a little bit like we are complex, dynamic, adaptive systems, humans. And it's very hard to predict certain outcomes across the board on a population level. So I think you have to play around a little bit with regards to what works best for each individual. So for someone, this linear periodization might be absolutely optimal up until the point of competition. But for someone else, doing reps, two like sets that are sufficient to cause a stimulus of just 2 reps might be too fatiguing. So they can't actually get to competition day without the fatigue being too high so they can get the best performance outcomes. So John Kiley's work talks about these 2 types of... You've heard of homeostasis. Have you heard of allostasis as well? So it's more looking at...
Order, disorder, reorder.
I think so. I think so. Effectively, so why I'm a bit against linear periodization is because it doesn't leave as much room for the unpredictability of humans. And I think there are a variety of avenues that can lead to the best outcome. And that could just be keeping your reps above 6 all the way up until performance day. What are your thoughts about that?
I think 100% there are many ways to skin a cat, and everyone can go, everyone will, those elite powerlifters or whatever have found the way that works for them. I do think that, yes, although that does work, I would still stand by that. I think that for most people, them having, particularly in like my realm, like the demographic that I'm working with, people that might not necessarily be that, they're not elite powerlifters. They're very kind of like not weekend warriors, but they go to the gym every day, but it's not like their entire existence. Is they can probably see those progressions week on week and continue to build because they're still learning that skill or that ability to be able to do it, and they're not lifting, like they're not like a Lily Bridge where they're fucking squatting 300 kg and then have to take 2 weeks off. They're like, they've got 100 kg on the bar and like they can probably recover fine from that in a couple of days' time. So I think that for most people, I still think that linear is probably good. I do agree that there are plenty of exceptions and plenty of ways that you could go about it differently. I think that something to also consider though is that just because your program is linear doesn't mean you can't auto-regulate. And I think that's the key thing, is being able to if someone has a coach or someone has someone that they can discuss training with, is to have that more objective view and to not just be like, well, it's on my program, so I've got to get it done. It's like the better athlete is someone that's more aware and that will come to the session and be like, actually, today is not the day for me to rip heavy twos off the floor because my back is fucked from whatever, or I feel a bit of a twinge or whatever. So it's like, I think even if you have someone that is able to auto-regulate, then a linear progression still over the course of a training block, I think, would be better. But I don't disagree. I think there are plenty of ways that you can go about it. I do think it's an easy way for people to be able to follow when it's like, well, you did 10s, you did 8s last week, so we're going down to 5s this week. So I reckon we can probably slap another 5 kg on either side comfortably.
Yeah, and psychologically, that's such a nice way to do a program.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. Like weights, reps come down, weights go up. That makes logical sense. I think what fascinates me and what drives my whole thought behind this entire conversation is what is driving the outcome. Is it this external load and number of reps on the bar? I think that influences the outcome, but I don't think it's driving.
Yeah.
So you have two things. You have the external load, which is like what's going on around you, how much weight you've got, stability, all these kind of things, and then the internal load. And like this conversation takes into consideration things like femur length, and why a hack squat might be better for someone versus a barbell lift. So when you're doing a linear periodization versus, say, I don't know, a vertical periodization, or just keeping the reps exactly the same, or keeping them within a higher rep range, even if you're trying to drive strength outcomes. If you've got person 1 who drives linear periodization and person 2 who drives or runs a program where the reps never go below 8, and they both get positive outcomes, aka strength goes up on game day, anyway, so we're going to dive back into this chat.
Lay it up.
So you've got person 1, person 2 running slightly different programs. Person 1 doing linear periodization, person 2 doing something similar to, they keep all the reps the same, but they both get positive outcomes. So for me, the interesting question there is, why? Why are they both getting positive outcomes? What is the principle that's driving these adaptations? So for me, and this is my narrative that I'm changing a lot, I don't think it fucking matters if it's 2, if it's 6, if it's 5, or however many fucking reps. I don't even think it matters the weight that's on the bar. I think what matters is the internal narrative that our body takes from the work that's done. Now, of course, you need to have some kind of objective, quantifiable metric moving forward, which is why it's so useful to have a program, have load, and then figure out this philosophy. But you know Jordan Peters, I think his approach to hypertrophy is the best. And his philosophy is, from what I've gathered, effectively, when you are bulking, you need to add the smallest possible increment of weight to every single exercise, 500 grams effectively, and try and match the reps that you did the prior week. I think that is beautiful and perfect with regards to programming, and I don't think anything else really needs to change. And that's the most objective way with regards to see if you can make progress every single week. And I think that's possible. So I don't like the idea of programming a 12-week block or an 8-week block to test at the end. I think the test needs to be built into the program in every single session. And that's the problem that Jordan Peters solves by having this. Each week you're going into that session trying to beat the previous session. The reps don't change because it's hard to decipher what the internal stimulus will be when the external stimulus is changing so much.
I think, though, that's contradicting what you've just said about strength, because that's assuming that on the day that they're good. when, like, for example, we were talking about the eights, the day that they can't turn up and do whatever, instead of them dropping down and going heavier, they're just going to do 10 reps instead. It's like, what happens then to I guess it's the same argument when they're testing at the end, but like, what happens if you hit the following week and you can't add load, and you can't add reps, or you can't progress from your test that you've had that week? Does that mean that you failed, or does it actually matter that much because you still created some form of a stimulus, which is probably going to lead to biological signaling to build new tissue?
So I love that question. So for me, the answer is in the other factors. So when you're running a linear periodization, a lot of the time you are training, it's hard to decipher unless you've run the same block previously. If it's a new block, new exercises, or new rep ranges, etc., etc., it's hard to decipher if you're actually making progress up until you test at the end. I believe humans are able to adapt on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. And I think if your intention is to come into a session and PB by 500 grams on every single exercise, every single set that you do, and try and match the reps or add a rep or two, and you fail to do so, I think that is information to pull out from that session that other levers in your life aren't being ticked.
Yeah.
Are you eating enough? Are you sleeping enough? Do you have meaning in your life? All of these other things. Do you have a good community? All of these other things. If those boxes are then all ticked and you still fail, that could be the moment to say, okay, I need to take a couple more days off before I hit this body part again, or adjust something else.
Yeah.
And I think that gives you this objective, quantifiable evidence that what you're doing is working as you go forward. Yeah. And I think you can do that for, say, we're talking about powerlifting in a way, but the strength and hypertrophy crossover is so big with regards to what's the difference. It's really hard to decipher. Yeah. I really believe that if you just build more muscle tissue and then you go and do the particular skill or exercise that you want to perform higher in, if you've built a lot of muscle tissue, you can do that skill in two or three sessions. And that, for me, that would be a very logical way of approaching powerlifting.
Yeah, I still don't think that just by you building muscle alone without the skill will allow you to do it. Like, I could do a 16-week hack squat progression, and I'm absolutely hammering my quads like 2 times a week, really hard, big quad growth, whatever. I come back, and I would need a good 3 months at least of back squatting to hit the same weights as if I were to do, and this is me personally, it might be different for other people, but like, I know that I would need to be doing the skill of that movement multiple times a week for me to express that strength. Without, like, even if I've built loads of muscle tissue, it won't have, for me, the same carryover. And I think for maybe it's dependent on the training age. For a beginner, probably yes, it would have a direct impact straight away. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, like, from a like, I don't change the exercises on the game program for the entirety of like a 10-week phase, because for exactly that reason, where you're learning the movement for the first 5 weeks before anyway, for you to like understand it. So there's so much room for you to be able to progress every week. Ideally, how I would program it would be, I would just give an exercise and I would just say 5 to 10 reps, and I would just give reps and reserve prescriptions, and that would be the same for the entire block. But the way that I do it is linear, so that people just have a bit of structure to follow, where they're like, we're going to do 2 weeks of 10s, then we're going to do 2 weeks of 8s, then we're going to do 10-8-6 for 2 weeks, then we're going to do 6s for 2 weeks, as like an 8-week progression for them to be able to like, oh, well, I'm down to 6s, so I better add more weight. Whereas like, we probably don't need to have that incentive. We can just lift more weight anyway. And more weight doesn't necessarily mean it's a better stimulus. but it's an easy way for them to see progression in the weight that they're lifting, and probably have a little bit more intensity, having previously dialed in the movement because they've been doing it for 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever. So I completely agree with you that we can continue to adapt, and probably the only reason why we can't adapt is the variables outside, like stress, eating enough, sleep quality, etc., that have limited your ability to progress, until you might get to like a 16-20 week period of doing the same accessories or same movements, and then you're like, I've got nothing, I can't progress in that anymore.
Okay. So a few things. So if you say you smashed a hack squat and we measured the cross-sectional area of your quads, your glutes.
Yeah.
If you kept some kind of, I wouldn't even say that. So for you said it would take about 3 months to come back in and back squat
maybe
PB, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Why?
Because of the motor control and the skill of the movement that is required for you to be able to express that strength, I think, is important.
Is there, could you see, if you built, like, say you went from 93 kilos and you did hack squats, no back squats, hack squats for 6 months, and you went up to 100 kilos?
Well, that I don't think that would happen, but I don't think I could build that much muscle.
No, not pure muscle. You built some fat.
Yeah.
But it's 6 months, hack squatting, once or twice a week, whatever. You progress the weights for massively, over like 500 grams a session for 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. I don't even know what the math is, but it's a lot. And you're heavier. Yeah. So you've built more tissue. Yeah. You're heavier. Do you think second back squat session you'd come in PB?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Do you think there is an amount of muscle tissue that you could build in your quads that you would then go and PB in that week 2 of back squats within the first 3 weeks?
Yeah. I couldn't quantify that though, but
it's hard to quantify. It's a shit question.
No, I think you
see what I'm getting at.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I definitely think in a lot of cases, yes, it would be the case. I think that I've been doing squat programs since I was 20, 21. I've done Smolov, Russian squat programs, Wendlers. I've done a lot of squatting, and I haven't got a massive squat to pay for it, but that says a lot about my fucking whatever, my limb length. I'm going to blame it all on the femurs, but I've definitely gone through periods where I've been in Muscle Works, Bethnal Green, 4 times a week, going ham sandwich on the hack squats, going ham sandwich on pendulum squats, going ham sandwich on leg press, leg extension, hamstring curl, hip thrusts, Bulgarian split squats, properly bulking hard with it as well. And I know that I would need to still have the skill of the movement under my belt in order for me able to express that properly. And I agree, the amount of time required for me to dial in that skill would probably be less, because my legs are strong, I've built more muscle. But again, this is kind of we're defining the difference between strength and cross-sectional area. I would have also been getting stronger on the hack squat. So I will have been, it's not like the cross-sectional area is the only thing that's changed. I will have also improved my neural drive in my quads, my glutes, by doing the hack squat. So is it the cross-sectional area alone that has caused that? Or is it the neural drive from the hack squat that will also have impacted it, I guess?
Yeah, fully. I love this conversation. I think the cross-sectional area is a massive driver on an individual level, probably the biggest driver. I'm not talking about me versus you. I'm talking about me versus me, or you versus you.
Yeah.
Because you can't compare apples to oranges. You can only compare yourself to yourself. And for me, if you build more tissue in the quads and the glutes, your squat will go up. The amount of time it takes to kind of take that new tissue and get new outcomes is dependent on, again, a million other factors. So again, huge crossover with, for me anyway, strength and hypertrophy.
No, for sure. Completely agree.
And training outcomes, I think that's awesome. And I think that's a really cool part of the program. Anything else you want to say on that?
I think I'm still trying to figure out like how to communicate that well, like the difference between, so like for example, I like the content that I put out on social media is more specific to people on the gain program, but and from my experience, what does well for me when I put out content on social media is slightly more advanced topics, like slightly higher level information is better engaged with. Whereas in the gym, that the demographic is much lower than that. And what I'm trying to figure out at the moment is how to best communicate with the members when this is a strength response versus this is a hypertrophy response. And I know that we're basically agreeing that they're very cross correlated, but there is a difference between strength and a strength response and a hypertrophy response. Like I would be saying, for example, we're testing a 10 RM barbell reverse lunge in the gym at the end of this 12-week cycle, and it's a strength response. We're not trying to, obviously there will be some carryover of building muscle in those muscle groups, but for example, we're saying like, let your knee go wherever it goes. Like because we're very particular with like, this is a quad bias variation, this is a glute bias variation. And here I'm saying you can use the floor to rebound. You can like, you can go down. You're essentially just trying to go from A to B and lift the most weight. Essentially, that's the metric that we're determining. Whereas then we're doing some rear foot elevated split squats later on in the week, and that is purely a hypertrophic. The goal is to build muscle. So it's like some form of eccentric control, 1 second pause in the bottom position, shifting their center of mass forwards, getting their knee to drive over their toe, etc. So it's like I'm trying to find the simplest, or figuring it out in my own mind, the simplest way to communicate that to members, to just be like, this is a muscle building response versus this is a strength building response. When we're talking about it now and we're hashing it out, there's probably, it's harder to kind of, we can't really distinguish, we're struggling to distinguish between the two in a way. So I guess my only comment on it is like, I'm still figuring it out.
I think like narrative is everything. So for example, we're having an in-depth discussion about this topic, and we are pretty obsessed with learning about everything there is to learn about sports science, developing different physical outcomes. How you sell something is very different to the reality of what's going on. So it depends who you're talking to. It depends, like this conversation is not really one I'm having with my clients. And I think I'm really into trying to understand as many complexities as possible in order to simplify.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think with strength and hypertrophy, I want that to be one quality because it's simpler. And I can understand when you're trying to market something to people why you'd want two qualities. But I really think this strength and hypertrophy is one bubble, because the crossover with all the qualities and all the physiological adaptations that you're looking for, they're the same thing. There is really no difference. And like for me, this conversation has kind of pushed me towards that even more, because I'm thinking about like more neural drive. It's good for strength, but it's also good for hypertrophy.
Yeah.
So all of those things.
It's pretty hard to build cross-sectional area without improving your neural drive.
Yeah.
Anyway,
fully.
Like we couldn't just be like, oh, I've just slapped. Like it's not like Arnold talks about like the sculpture where you just slap on more clay. It's like you can't do that. You can't just add more cross-section area without there being any like increased satellite cells, more pathways, etc., etc.
With regards to, have you ever had a really good period of strength and hypertrophy gains? And when was that? And can you describe that to me a little bit?
Yeah, so probably when I first started doing the game program, not plugging, but like I'd learned about N1 and like biomechanics and understanding biomechanics. And I'm not saying that he's like the GOAT of biomechanics, but he's got some really good information. And my understanding of joints, angles, and how to get the most out of an exercise just skyrocketed from doing that. And I then unlocked my ability to be able, because I'd always trained with intensity. Like CrossFit's all about like going to failure and like fucking yourself up. So I always had that in me. But then it was like able to like, okay, this is what I need to do to be able to get my quads to absolutely like rinse themselves on this exercise. Understanding like range of motion, understanding the angles, all of those things, like what machines, why these machines are better because of the angle it creates, because of the stability that it creates, like whatever. And then understanding that alongside all of that nerdiness comes intensity. And when I started N1, it was then like, you know, that like optimal, or like they take the piss out of it now, like the optimal crew, where it's like you have to be like reverse banded, whatever. And I went into that rabbit hole for a bit. And then you have like the other end of the spectrum, which is like lateral raising like 30 kg dumbbells and just like rip it up as like just move the weight from A to B kind of thing. And it's like finding the middle ground between that, where it's like, yes, try and be accurate and execute this movement as best you can, but at the end of the day you probably just need to like go close to failure. And that was really what I ate a lot of food for an extended period of time. I was training in muscle work, so I was hitting hack squats hard, like cable machines hard, converging chest pressures hard, all of those things, training with high intensity, and I wasn't doing much conditioning. So I was like literally just bulking hard, getting strong, getting fat, and lifting weights hard. And the difference in how big I am now muscular wise versus how I was when I joined March On, pretty different.
Yeah.
So
I love that. So one of my favorite thing is helping people understand what it takes to develop these adaptations. When you work with people in person or online, first of all, what do you think is their limiting factor generally with making progress? And how do you communicate that across with them to get
I actually
past
think
that?
it's movement quality. I think that's the foundation for people, is that they don't care. And there are so many exceptions where people move like shit and they still are absolutely massive, and they'll make strength improvements or they make gains or whatever. But I think the movement quality always has. That's what we talk about on the PFCA, the education side of March On, is like movement quality, particularly in gyms, is like number one. It's like get people to move well, and then as they are a beginner, and dose the intensity as you go. And then if you build that motor control and like that strength continuum, you build the motor control and the muscular endurance first, then you can really truly express strength and power later on down the line. But if you've never developed motor control, it's going to be hard. You can still express power, but I feel like it's going to be harder for you if that movement quality isn't there. So when I watch, like, I get a lot of DMs of blokes in gyms. Like, I get a lot of blokes sending me topless photos of like, look at my gains.
Love that.
And I get a lot of blokes sending me videos of them deadlifting or squatting, or like, can you have a look at this exercise or whatever. And I just think that execution is just average in general. I think that if people moved better and understood what the intention of the exercise was, particularly from a bodybuilding perspective, and felt it and knew where their body needed to be in space, that proprioception, they would probably get more out of it rather than them just going heavier. But you then go too far that way and you're obsessing over your bar path or whatever it is, and you therefore lack the intensity, you also miss a trick there. So it's like, I guess it's movement quality mixed with intensity.
So those two things are kind of
because then the other thing that I struggle with is getting people to understand that more volume is not better, but more intensity is probably what they should be looking for. Like, the first thing that I always get asked is like, can I add another something onto the game program? And I'm like, you've got shitloads of volume there for you to be able to create more than enough of a stimulus that you need. You're just training like a pussy, or you're not taking it close to failure, or your execution of the movement isn't as good as it could be. You don't need to do another arm session on top of you training your biceps twice a week. That's fine. You hit them hard, you'll be fine. But you're like, you do your 8th rep and you're like, oh, say it on the program, cool, I'll stop there, rather than like pushing it harder.
And how do you communicate that with your clients? Those two things. So movement quality and intensity.
Clients online or clients in the gym?
Both.
In the gym, it's a lot easier because we're absolute sticklers for movement quality. We're obsessed over, not obsessed, but like we really care about people moving well. And side tangent, it's actually something that I've probably stepped away from a little bit in person. I used to be so obsessive and like correcting people's movement, and I think that sometimes puts shackles on people. So like, you know, if there was a personal trainer listening to this thinking like I've got to be obsessed over movement quality, to an extent, but if you're always putting the reins on your client because they haven't perfectly executed whatever you wanted and it lacks intensity for them to be able to get a response, that's also potentially not great coaching. And like what we talk about in the gym is like, are they safe? Then efficacy, are they moving from A to B, or are they performing the movement or that movement? Like, are they doing a strict press versus doing a push press? And then efficiency after that. So like, if they're safe and you've given them a cue, or you've given them 2 cues in that 10-minute block of them doing some squats or whatever, and they're not necessarily adhering to it, or there's still things that could be changed, but you've already given them some coaching, you're probably better off just leaving them, because people can't take on information that much. And you going over to Karen again and saying, cool, now this time I want you to do this as well, it's too much information. She's better off just like layering on the 1 or 2 pieces of information that you've given her then. So that's something that I say to the coaches that work with me is, if you're changing people too much, like, are they safe? Cool, probably, like, and you've given them a little bit of help with their efficiency, just leave it there, like come back to it next week, sort of thing. So in the gym, that's how we kind of go about movement quality, and it's very easy for us to control it.
And what about intensity?
Again, like, we talk about the feeling for people within the gym a lot of the time, where it's like, ask it, like, or I'm looking around the room, because that's what we have the beauty of, is that it's all in person. So we're watching 8 people or 10 people RDL or bench press all at the same time, and you can see when people hit their 8th rep of their 8 to 10 that we've programmed them, and it looks like they've got 6 more reps. I'm like, cool, turn the music down and be like, just pause there for a second, team. How many of us felt like on those last couple of reps the dumbbells started to slow down? Did they slow down? No. Cool, let's go heavier. Like, if we want to create a stimulus that's going to build some muscle, that rep speed's got to slow down. That, like, simple things like that. It's like, whereas then again, going back to what we were talking about before with the strength, I would argue that, like, if Steve pushes too hard on his back squat session that day and he might struggle to progress the following week. And again, this is my bias with linear, where it's like, we're probably better off like leaving a little bit in the tank every single week for you to do that, rather than like, I feel good today, boom, next week, fuck, I've dropped right down. So that's probably the difference in the intensity that we would coach. Is like, today, team, when you're doing your sets of 6 on your back squat, I want you to leave a little bit in the tank for you to be able to progress next week, because you're going to be doing 6s again. Whereas with the bodybuilding, I'd be more like, let's make sure that those last couple of reps go a little bit close towards failure.
And is that because of the exercise difference?
Sometimes. And then sometimes it's just because we almost need to flirt with the intensity over that 12-week period. But I like, and as I'm saying it now, I'm thinking about it, because it's like, if they're doing a dumbbell bench press and they go heavy, they do 30 kg dumbbells one week, and then they can't do it the second week because they pushed too hard the week before, but they've still taken it to failure, or within the same amount of reps in reserve, and they were down to the 27.5s, have they still created as much of a stimulus to build muscle or not? I don't know. I don't think we could ever quantify that.
And so it's a massive difference as well, the theoretical conversation we're having now and the practical. So for me, it's very common that a client will come in and have a session that's not as good as the last session. That is a prime example for us to have it invites the conversation with me and my client to talk about why. And look at all these other parts of your life. Are they aligned with who you want to be, where you want to go, that kind of thing, the outcomes you want to drive? And I think I'm so biased towards how I do it, but I think it gives an anchor if they've got a test every single week. Every session they're stepping in the gym, it's like, fuck, I've got to do better than last time. And if I'm not, I probably should organize. I should sleep better. I've got the session tomorrow. I should eat better. I've got the session tomorrow. It sets you up for higher standards in other areas of your life, which is why I love driving this week on week progression, which is, even though it's not, of course, like it's never every week you add 500 grams. Like it's never that, or it's never you add a rep. Sometimes we just don't have the equipment in the gym to do that. But that's one of the reasons why I love this weekly test of adding bits and bits.
But how many of your clients train to like just for the enjoyment?
Everyone.
But my question then is like, how many of them are as obsessed as you are of them PBing each week?
So I would say, through the nature of how I am and for how long I've been working with them all, the ones that don't align have dropped off.
Yeah.
And now I've been working with my people for a very long time. We're all on the same board. They're bought in, the outcomes are being driven, and they've seen the results. Therefore, they believe in what we're doing, and the narratives are kind of aligned.
I think for you, that works great. For me, in a group class environment,
it's very different.
Massive. And like, I've got to take into account that like, Karen wants to get pissed at the weekend, but she comes into the gym so that she can like offset some of the calories, and at the same time she wants a bum.
Can we I need to pee super bad. Cool. Could you be a little closer as well sometimes? Trying to pick up.
Yep.
So back into it. So I think one really interesting part of our jobs is, like, we've talked a lot about the theoretical side. I think the storytelling side of things with regards to how we communicate this with clients is so important with how we drive these adaptations, because understanding that a set needs to be close proximity to failure and actually doing it are two very different things. And from what I've seen and what I see in public gyms, people don't generally train hard enough.
Agreed.
And I think that conversation about how to get people to understand why and how is a very valuable one. Do you have that with your members? How do you guys go around that?
What, getting them to train with more intensity?
Exactly.
I think just going back to like what we were saying before, where it's like them understanding what intensity looks like and feels like. It's like that the weight starts to slow down, because ultimately that, as we know from a physiological perspective, that's where the cross bridging happens for you to be able to create the biological response to build muscle from. And if those reps don't start to slow, then you're not creating as much intramuscular force as you could. So your hypertrophic response might not necessarily be as good as it could be.
Is that how you tell it to them?
No. I just say that your rep speed starts to slow.
1 second, I'm just gonna...
Yeah.
Do you, because obviously I don't know the environment, but I've seen your training and you ramp the tunes up and you get hyped.
Yeah.
And they, of course, get to see that.
I do the same for them.
You do the same for them?
Yeah,
yes.
tunes are up. Pretty much the same volume, yeah.
do you get them to talk to each other and like push each other in sets? Is like that CrossFit vibe?
Yeah,
That's wicked.
in some, and then for some of those they don't need that. But like I know within the class of the members that have been there since we opened the gym, that have been training with under me for like 2 and a bit years, and I'd be like, "How you feeling today, Trist?" Whatever, and he's like, "Oh, fucking on the beers, I smashed like 3 vapes over the weekend, like my lungs hurt, whatever." And it's like, all right, maybe let's not go too hard on the back squats today. And then like 1 week is like, "Tris, that deadlift's looking class. Like, how do you feel?" It's like, "Yeah, I feel good." It's like, "Right, let's fucking chuck another 10 kg on each side." So it's like, that's the art of coaching, where you know the people, like you know your clients, but to be able to do that in a group setting, that's the challenge. But it's like to be able to like see that she's only been goblet squatting for 2 weeks, so like, does she need to go that much heavier? Let's just sit there for a couple more weeks and try and improve the movement quality. And then over on the other side, it's getting them to understand, to build their awareness around like why, like you say, with outside of the gym, why they haven't potentially PB'd. It's like, oh, why we were trying to go heavier than we did last week. It's like, how did that feel? I was like, "Oh, I felt really off." I was like, "Where are you in your menstrual cycle?" It's like, "Oh, I'm about to come on." It's like, okay, fine, that's probably why. So it's like getting them to understand those things by just having a bit of a chat with them will allow them to be able to then do it autonomously. So I guess that's how we manage the intensities, because you can have those little huddles as you go around, where it's like, because we'll put the clock on and it might be like, you've got 12 minutes to do 3 sets of 12, and we'll have 2 coaches on the floor just walking around the room. So you're kind of like, you're not watching every single set and every single rep, but you get to watch some. So then you're like, that looks great. How did that feel? Cool. Let's go a little bit heavier. And then like, oh, I need you to try this. I need you to try that. So you're constantly dosing in whether you think that they should add the intensity or not. And then it might be like, "I'm actually just not feeling it today, Pads. Like, I feel like I'm a bit drained. Like, I just don't want to push it today." And I'm like, cool, let's not. So like, yeah, I guess that's how I do it in the gym, managing the intensity and making sure that they understand what they need to do to get something out of it. Whereas online, it's real hard, because a lot of people also don't engage in the program. They just follow the program. They don't message on the community locker room. They don't, which is like the chat function. They don't interact with me on social media. So I don't know how many, like what they're doing or how they're moving. There are loads of people that I haven't got a Scooby, how they squat, or if they're even squatting, or if they're just doing the upper body session, they're binning off the rest of the week or whatever it is. But the people that I do have, like, for example, I literally put a message in the locker room here this morning, like a broadcast that will pop up on everyone's phone, and it's like, "Happy Sunday, guys," blah blah blah. And then it was just like, tomorrow, like, we're in week 7 of this block, which is, we're starting to get into like the real meat and potatoes. Like, they're going to be building up, they're going to be doing a 3RM RP9 tomorrow, and I'll be doing it as well. Like, if you're thinking about going for that casual long run, don't. Like, if you want to get strong, and one of your key goals is for you to build some strength, rest today, have a big Sunday roast, get to bed early, and you'll feel the difference. So I guess that's me. I try and drip feed that information in, but like, if you've got 1,000 people, which will hopefully become 2,000, which will hopefully become 5,000 or whatever in the years, like, how much control can you have? And obviously I want to have as much control and help as many people as I can, but there also has to be kind of like, I can put as many parameters and shackles on people, but like, if someone feels good on week 6 of a 10-week program, and they've ripped a heavy one off the floor because it felt good that day, like, fucking go for it. Like, yeah, is what it is.
Excellent. I think that those are like 2 of the biggest problems in our industry: the quality and the quantity. I would call it quantity or intensity. You could put it under those 2 things. And it's very much like the sensory motor scale competency. So you've got like sensory in terms of feel, movement quality, and then motor in terms of intensity output that you're going to get, and you work along this, and solving that problem of getting people to move better and at high intensities is exceptionally hard, because that's where the uncomfortable is. Your body's going to try and find the easiest way to do things. We're not looking for the easiest, we're looking for these adaptations. And I think we're both biased towards this kind of scientific nitty gritty point of view. But what I think is exceptionally powerful, and what I got from Pat Davidson, is the stories that we wrap it up in. I don't know if you guys ever do like a story time at the start of a sesh to just kind of set the tone, set the scene of how you want the outcomes to be, or more like if you want to drive any adaptation in your life, something's got to be challenging. So if you want it to be positive or anything like that. I don't know if you watch Casey Neistat's vlogs back in the day.
I don't, but like I've recently come across him.
Did you watch his marathon one?
No.
He just posted. But it's all about this, like, choosing to do hard things. You're going to face hard things in your life no matter what. If you choose to do them, it's probably better than them just happening to you. What's your perspective on telling stories? I think your social media is amazing. I don't think there's anyone else doing it like you in the UK. It's so good. I'm not on Instagram that much, to be fair, but from what I've seen, it's like out fucking standing, and you create characters and stories, which is the best way to take on information. How can coaches do that to help their clients and members?
That's a great question. I don't know. How do they do it?
Well, you do it. How do you do it?
Well, from a social media perspective, it's trying to almost give them or show them examples that relate to them. So like I posted this like piss takey video the other day about like Karen skipping breakfast, and it was on like why you might be better off not skipping breakfast and doing intermittent fasting. And it was like Karen, who's trying to manage her calories a little bit better. She skips breakfast and she smashes a load of Pringles at 3:00 in the afternoon. And it's like, just if someone can kind of be like, oh, is that me? Maybe I'm doing that, or I'm intentionally having a small breakfast because I'm thinking, oh, it's less calories, but it results in me ending up to eat like multiple biscuits that are in the office at 3:00 in the afternoon, which is probably, I might have avoided that had I have had more eggs on toast with some tomatoes on the side at breakfast. So I guess that's the story from that comes about on social media, where it's like trying to find not archetypes, but just like telling a bit of a skitty story, a bit of banter of like, oh, you've got to go slow to grow. And it's like, oh, that's a narrative that I used in the past. Okay. What's this guy saying about it? Okay, maybe that might make a little bit more sense. So that's from social media there. I guess from like a story time perspective, we always have a brief around the board. So we always talk about the workout. So like how you might like show the iPad to the client and be like, this is what we're doing today, if they didn't know or they didn't have it already. And it's like we just spend a minute or two in front of the board at the start of every session, talk about the intentions. So it might be that, cool team, we're doing like linear periodization, unfortunately. It'd be like, cool, last week we were doing sets of 8, this week we're doing sets of 6 on your back squat. So the goal is that if you did last week and you did the week before, today, if you're feeling good, I want you to try to add a little bit more weight to the bar than what you were doing before. So they just have an understanding of where the intention is. So it's like, cool, Catherine's thinking, all right, well, I hit 50 for a pretty rough set of 8, maybe, and I'll be walking around the gym, like when we've got those 12 minutes of work, when they're doing it, they've warmed them up, we've talked about the intentions of the movement, etc., etc. We then go off into that 12-minute block, and I'll go over to Catherine and be like, what'd you hit last week? And she was like, 50. I was like, how did it feel? She was like, last couple of reps are pretty ugly. I was like, okay, how'd you feel today? Yeah, I feel pretty good. Why don't you think about hitting 50 on your second set and see how it feels from there, and then we can gauge it. Like, so they have some understanding of where the intensity and where the intentions need to be in the session, and then from that, hopefully they can put the pieces together as to how they feel, how it felt last week, and then gauge it that way, so that if they've been in that environment for a year, they automatically know when they come in and they're doing some squats in the empty bar, they're like, oh, I feel like shit today. It's like, okay, I was on the beers at the weekend, maybe I should just take it easy this session rather than just trying to hammer through. So that's the story time from there. It's tough to do it in an app. We have I do it. We have a coach's video, so I don't know if you've seen. I'll show you, but basically they can click onto a coach's video for every session. It's like me having that same thing where it's like a 2-minute brief talking about where the week is in relation to the program, what they should be trying to get, where the intensity or where the intentions should be coming within that session. But how many people watch it? I think it's probably about 5%, because like for example, on a Wednesday, I'll put either rowing or skiing or running conditioning, and I put in capitals, do one of these 3 options, not 2 or 3. And then I'll say it in the coaches' videos as well. And then I'll probably every week someone's like, are we supposed to be rowing and running in the same session? That's a lot. It's like, watch the fucking coaches' notes, bro. So I guess that's the story time side from it. But like, what does that look like for you when you give a story time to client? How does that work?
So I've been writing it down in Instagram posts, but it will be more in terms of, so for me the story time is, oh, the camera's there. Camera's dead. Do you want to keep going audio?
Yeah, fuck them. Yeah,
fuck them.
We could just put like stills of us.
Stills, yeah, awesome. So for me, story time is like, all of this science stuff is great, but the thing that I've had in front of me is the experience of the challenge that's required to cause change. I might start it with regards to questions, because it's so different doing one-on-one versus a group versus online.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think for online, social media posts is the best way to do it, and write out story or communicate a story. And you can get that from examples that you've had in the week with interactions with clients or members and things like that. I think that's exceptional. But talking about things like the hero's journey, like whatever your favorite film is, there's going to be a journey that the character goes through.
Yep.
And rather than just like, these are the rep sets that we need to kind of work on or improve on from last week, etc., etc., it's like trying to hit some social, cultural aspects of who this person is to get them fired up to drive that adaptation that's really hard to achieve.
So you're essentially just Gogginsing them.
Exactly. Goggins them to the tits, like go hard in the Goggins off. But it is that like, figure out who they are, what makes them tick, why they're really there. And I think that sets a tone for the future and the progress. If you want to get outstanding results that are like, for example, your clients or members are stronger than other PTs and coaches, I think that's a nice target. They need to do ridiculous amounts of work. It's nothing is fucking easy. And like, Goggins them in a way that is nice and takes into consideration who they are and who they want to be, but also like who they understand. And everyone's different, and the people use the gym for different reasons. But I think with regards to like optimal-ish outcomes, I think I like that way of doing it, that storytelling. That's what I would say about that, yeah.
So we did an interesting, so I reached out to like 20 odd members, like kind of like picked and choose them just so that we could get a bit more alignment on our marketing, because we were just getting like shit leads through paid marketing, like people that just don't align with like March On. And just going off like our story time, overriding like the March On slogan is like without limits. So it's like living a life without limits, where anything is possible. There's no limitations on whatever it is that you do. And we want that to be at the forefront of what's going on in the gyms as well. So it's like, what does Catherine's living a life without limits look like? What does so-and-so's, and everyone's idea of what their life without limits is different. So that's very much at the forefront of what we're trying to do. And that's what gets people to be sticky in the gyms and stay with us for an extended period of time. Is that it's part of their identity and their life of like you say, I'm just going to do hard shit. So that's where we are and what we're trying to do more of. But what's interesting is that of those 20 people that I selected, and it wasn't like they were all the same demographics or whatever, literally every single one of them, like 18 of them, said health, not performance. And that's what's really interesting to me, is that like maybe we've been getting it wrong. Not that we've been doing it wrong. I guess actually probably the opposite. We've been doing it right, where I've been a lot more holistic and a lot more like, how do you feel today? Like, it's okay, like, enjoy this, it's okay to have fun. Like, people, the main thing that people talk about why they come to us is because they feel healthy and they love the community and they love the coaches and they love the environment. And I guess it's like I'm going through it at the moment where I'm with the people within the gym anyway, and it's like, if you don't want to push today, that's fucking fine. It's like, I don't need to like give you this like Goggins motivation to like get you fired up on a session that you don't want to push. You don't want to push today. It's like, it's okay if like you can't be asked. Like, it's okay if you don't want to stay on track with your nutrition. And I think it's like normalizing that. And that, you know, there'll be people like that, if they listen to this, they'll think like that you're weak, like you're, you know, whatever.
Not
but
at all, hopefully.
I think it's like, we like, life's too short for you to like not say fuck it sometimes and like go off diet and just like, oh, maybe, oh, I can't be asked to train today, I'm just not going to train, I'm going to watch Shrek instead. Like, that's my go-to. Like, if I'm injured or like I haven't had a good session, my go-to will be like a pack of biscuits and Shrek and a cup of tea.
Love
and
that.
that will sort me right out. But it's like, I think it's I completely agree that like, to drive performance, what people lack is, like we talked about, movement quality, but intensity. They're not training hard enough. But with the community and the collective of people that I work with in person, that's a great byproduct of them being consistent and showing up in the gym.
Fully.
But what they love is like the community and them being supported and them being welcomed and them having an environment where they can come and just express themselves physically. And some days they want to go really hard and fuck themselves up, and some days they don't, and they just want to kind of like take it easy and just get a bit of a sweat on and like go home, and that's fine. So I think that's like, there's the empathetic, holistic coach side of me, and then there's, which is more me at Stratford, and then there's the gain side of me, which is like, if you're not rigged up, like you're not expressing your true potential, kind of thing. So it's like, I've kind of tried to meet in the middle between the two, and I think I could probably be more holistic on some of the things that I do on gain and a bit more empathetic, and there are some things that I could do on the in Stratford that would push people a little bit more potentially to live more of a life without limits.
I think that's like just perfect. I've got I've got a saying that I've just been saying in my head that I don't know where it's come from, but just like when I'm running or when I'm dialed in, I just keep saying, there is only love and work, and they're the same thing. Those couple of sentences, that's just what I'm saying in my head the entire time. And I think it's so true. Like, you have, like, no one is pushing 100% all the time. It's impossible.
No.
And
even Goggins is staring at his trainers for an hour.
even Goggins. But, and like, I think letting people know you don't have to, let's do what you can today. Let's just do what you can today.
Yeah.
Giving them the out, like, not even giving them the out, just being real. Like, you're not gonna be able to push every day. That is part of this game. Like, you're just not going to be able to. And giving them the space to still show up and get something in, those can turn into the best sessions of the year. It doesn't really matter. I think I'm quite obsessed with driving outcomes and getting results. Like, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
But that has to be on a foundation of love and care for that person in front of you.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, they're not going to trust you. They think you're just pushing them hard for the sake of pushing them hard. That's not what it's about. I think it's like, you got to show up and be like, yeah, whatever you can manage, let's see what you've got. There might be something else once we get started, but showing up with love and having that for your clients and holding the space and for your members so they feel okay and comfortable is essential. It's absolutely essential. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I think there's like different battles with in person and online.
Yeah.
Particularly with a group online. I can't imagine, but that's setting the tone for the community and that kind of thing is really hard. I actually think the secret sauce behind all of this, it just comes back to me being stories, telling good stories about like, it could be anything, like Harry Potter, about who he was at the start and to who he turned into to kill death itself. Like he's not always up top. Sometimes he fails in some of the movies, like he has bad periods, but there is this arc and translating that into the lifting world so people have something to buy into about what this journey can be, who you can become, and that transformational process. I think that's beautiful, and that's part of it. There's one big topic I wanted to talk about, and that is I think very on point for you, is the interference effect and where you stand on it, because your program is strength, hypertrophy, cardiovascular fitness.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the interference effect?
I flip-flop all the time with it. And, like, I know someone that we both follow, like Alec Blennis, will like argue, he tries to argue a lot of the times that there's no such thing as the interference effect. I think there definitely is a thing of the interference effect. I think that it's 100% possible for you to bring all of those specialisms up at the same time. I think that if you specified in each of those elements alone, you would get better outcomes from it. And I pretty much wholeheartedly believe that you're wrong if you think otherwise. Like, I stand by that. Like, if you only rode and you weren't trying to be a powerlifter, and yes, like, being hybrid doesn't mean you doing like an S&C strength session whilst doing like 4 rowing sessions a week. That's not the same thing. I'm talking about you like pushing like heavy strength work intentionally with the goal of you lifting the most weight possible alongside you doing a rowing, like 4 times a week rowing program. Like, you would be better off if you wanted to maximize your row, you'd be better off doing rowing program multiple times a week with some structured S&C to combat that rowing or to help that rowing. And like, particularly from a strength and conditioning perspective, as in like those two separate things, doing more conditioning impacts your strength. I feel there's obviously like a base element, like, the argument that yes, you need to do some aerobic training because your ability to recover between sets is your aerobic system. If you're doing sets of 10, your aerobic system is going to be working relatively hard at like when you're doing a back squat, for example. So if you've got no aerobic base, you're going to struggle to express strength there. But I'm talking about me doing a 3RM back squat on Monday and me doing 1K repeats with 1 minute rest, 10 sets. So an hour of lactate threshold, and then trying to rip a heavy one on a Friday, which is exactly what the gain program is next week. If I didn't do that running session, I would be better off. I would get more out of my 3RM back squat and my 1RM deadlift. Maybe not necessarily on that 1 week, but over the course of a training block. And I wholeheartedly believe that. But we're not trying to just be good at one. We're trying to be good at all of them. So it's finding the balance between the two. And there are ways that you can manage and mitigate that interference effect, I think. But I think it's pretty hard I think it's very hard to do all at the same time, which is why loads of people that are bumming hybrid training at the moment are really struggling to see improvements, because you either have to be a bit of a genetic freak or you have to nail all of your variables inside and outside of the gym for you to see progress in everything.
The way you've kind of described it, I'm feeling like there is a sweet spot where even if you're just trying to get strength outcomes, you still probably want a bit of cardio in there.
Yeah, for sure.
And I imagine a big part of your battle with your program is finding that sweet spot across time. How do you go about that process?
I think that, like when we were talking about like before about conditioning and its impact on strength in general, like it, or doing conditioning from like phase to phase, where like the rowing or the skiing intervals have to be like punchy interval sessions, and yes, over the long term, it would probably be better to have like a longer base period and then an intense period rather than having these like short, sugary, punchy interval sessions the whole time. But like, I would say that accumulating, and maybe this is just my lens because I'm naturally fitter than I am stronger. But I feel that strength needs more than cardio does in terms of improving. I don't know. As I say it, I question myself.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that personally.
I don't know. It's tough. Like I think that they both they both require a serious amount of time really for you to see big adaptations in both. I think that because of us flip-flopping between those different elements of conditioning, so like one block they're doing row, one block they're doing a Miko triangle, one block they're doing running, they don't necessarily need to have that many touches on that conditioning piece because they're acquiring the skill again. Does that make sense? So it's like, because they haven't run for a couple of weeks and maybe they do a 5K test week 1 and they do a 5K test week 10, they'll see improvements in it because just from doing it a couple times a week, because it's them acquiring the skill of running again, having not done it for a period of time. Them being able to hit a running PB might be pretty tough for them to do that alongside doing all the strength work that they're doing as well. They probably have to do more volume than that. But I think that for them to see progress in the strength alongside all the conditioning, I think there's more strength work that needs to come from it. And maybe that's my lens because I can get fitter with less volume and I need more to get stronger rather than it being the other way around. So, does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense. I think you have your bias. Because I think for some people, they can lift once a week, do full body and make ridiculous progress.
Yeah.
And they would have to absolutely graft to move any needle cardiovascularly.
Well, that's it. It's like, I don't get it when I see people in, like, I could probably not do any conditioning for 6 months and I'd still be able to go out and run whatever or go and do whatever. And like, I see people that I work with in person and they're like gasping their way around like a 200-meter run. I'm like, how the fuck are you so unfit? How can
you tell them that, obviously?
Yeah, sometimes. But like I guess it is my bias and it's my lens, because if I didn't squat for 6 months because of a knee injury or something like that, I probably wouldn't be able to come in and squat 100 kg on the bar. Whereas there'll be some people that won't lift for a few years and could come in and back squat 180 like it was nothing.
Yeah, I think that really depends on your structure, your history, your genetic, all of these factors. Yeah. Like me and my girlfriend Eleanor are opposites. I can run once a week or less and have one of the best top 1% population 5K time from running, from doing barely any cardiovascular health. But my strength quantifiably is horrendous. My ability to build muscle quantifiably is horrendous, whereas Eleanor, she'll touch the weights once a month and build so much tissue. So it's I think that just really depends on who you are, your genetics, where you come from, etc., which is why it's such a hard problem for you to solve on a 1,000 people group program. Yeah. So that's my question. How do you go? You've got your tests. Are you looking at the data of the outcomes from all these people and being okay, this is what worked, this is what didn't? Okay, is everyone progress? Is some people not? What Like that, what's your process with analyzing the data, the outcomes,
Yeah.
and how does that influence how you move forward with the programming?
It'll be more from it'll be from the people that are communicating with me. Like right now the app still, we only launched the app like a year and a bit ago, so it's still new, and it's our app. It's like, we're still doing all the coding and the back end for everything. But that was literally a conversation that I had with one of our tech guys last week, which was around how we could improve it. And I was like, I want to be able to see the data of like where people have gone, how their progression is in their strength and their lifts over the last 6 months. Can't see it right now, but I can commit that. I've got a lot of people that I'm chatting to that are on the program, and they'll tell me when they've PB'd and what's working well. How did you like this session? Do you enjoy that? Are you getting fit at the same time? Whatever. So I am getting that data. But maybe not on the same scale that I could. I guess that one way to potentially combat it is to have more variety. But I find by adding more options, like optional accessories. But I always find that people just end up doing more because they think that more is better, because they follow Ollie Archon and he trains twice a day, like 6-7 days a week, pretty much. And he's a robot, and everyone thinks that in order to get the same results as him, they have to do the same amount as him, and they don't. But they see him running at 5 a.m. and then lifting at 10 a.m. They're like, I've got to do that if I want to like look like him or be like him or whatever. And if I put in optional run, they'll all do it. If I put in optional biceps, they'll all do it, type thing, or most of them will. When it's better off me being like, I'd rather give you minimum effective dose and slowly bring it all up and see if we can tweak things or make things better over the course of the months or the years that we do it. I try to vary up the blocks a little bit. So rather than it always being like heavy squat, heavy bench, heavy deadlift, it might be like 1 week with one block we do like a 5k run, the next one we do like a 40-minute erg test, the next one we do a 1RM deadlift, the next one we do a 10RM RDL. So it's like they're almost like moving away and around from these specialisms all the time, so it kind of like, yeah, it's not too I don't need to worry too much about the data of how everyone's doing, because they'll almost be bringing in different elements of their strength and their fitness at the same time.
Have you read Agile Periodization? Have you heard of it with Mladen Jovokovic or something like this? Because he talks about having like it's basically, do you know vertical integration for programming? You keep all the physical qualities in year round. Basically GPP year round, and then you bias certain ones as you go through the year, depending on the outcome that you're looking for. I think you'd really like his textbooks. Those are awesome. Loads of really interesting and kind of not straightforward or logical with regards to what the current body of literature says from sports science. Kind of controversial. He pulls from places like IT and philosophy to get some of his answers, which I think is really cool. But he talks about minimum viable product. This is why, or minimum viable program, minimum effective dose, which is why I thought you might have heard of it when you mentioned it, because I think it's honestly the problem of programming for 1,000 people is crazy. But for yourself individually, I know you did the Ironman, and I know you did your best to kind of keep building strength or at least maintain you were pushing strength and hypertrophy at the same time. If you were programming just for yourself or on an individual basis, what would be your process of decision making with regards to how a program would look?
Well, it would depend what I'm working towards.
My bad, sorry. Something like we want to get better at strength, hypertrophy, and cardiovascular fitness. So you can choose the metric. Like it could be do an Ironman in under whatever 12 hours, and let's just say improve squat, bench, deadlift. Crazy, but like, what would be your decision making process there?
Yeah, so it would be specific, a little bit more specific to that. I probably wouldn't have as general a program as the game program is right now, where like that is actually my goal, is to probably not next year, because I need to have a hernia operation, which is going to put me out for like 6 weeks on like in the period now, which is like where I can probably do the most damage in terms of strength and muscle building. Basically what I want to do is a sub 12 hour Ironman and a 1,200 pound total. So 550 or 545. So it'd be like a 185 back squat, 220 dead, 140 bench. I've hit all of those before, minus the bench. I've got 137.5, close. But,
No, you got that. That's easy.
so, but that's me when I was like 100 kegs. So I was like fat, strong, and like wasn't doing any cardio. So to get back to those numbers, I need to have like a good 6-month block of like heavy lifting, doing well, and that's probably not going to be possible in order for me to then have 6 months of me maintaining or losing a little bit of that strength while I do a 6-month Ironman prep to get a sub 12. So that is the goal, and for me to do that on the same day. So I would like the full Fergus same day. So Fergus Crawley. So wake up 4 a.m. He's done that, yeah.
Same weights or
1,200 pound total, but I think he's got like a smaller bench and a bigger
and 12 hour.
Yeah. So the Ironman that I did is a bit harder, yeah. But I want to do that Ironman and sub 12.
Yeah, come on.
Sorry, and 1,200 pound total. Yeah. So the goal this year when I do my Ironman is to do sub 12 in isolation, and then do sub 12 again, but with a 1,200 pound total the year after. So obviously those are the specifics, but I would then probably be specific to each of those goals. But if I was going to be a little bit more of a generalist, I would program exactly how the game program is right now. Maybe one additional conditioning session from the 2 that I program in right now. So right now it is upper body, lower body, full body, interval conditioning, easy conditioning, and then like a pump on that easy conditioning day. I would probably put in another conditioning day on top of that,
so
which is what I do right now.
For your goal of the 12-hour sub 1,200 pounds total, could you walk me through how that would you just do 6 months specific powerlifting with the sprinkle of cardiovascular bits, and then ramp up the similar kind of Ironman program that you did for this previous one, and still trying to lift 2-3 times a week?
Yeah, so I'd probably pull right back on all the bodybuilding volume, and it'd be like super low bodybuilding maintenance, and it would be like, we're talking like 1 to 2 sets to failure of muscle groups once/twice a week. Probably like do once a week lower body bodybuilding to failure, whereas I was doing 2 times a week, 2 to 3 sets when I was doing this Ironman prep before. So I pull that volume right down, keep the intensity the same, but pull the volume right down. I would do the same amount of volume that I did, which was 2 bikes, 2 swims, 2 runs. But I might add in another run, because my running is where I got fucked a little bit. Obviously, that's the accumulation of you having done 8 hours worth of work beforehand or whatever. But I can definitely improve that a lot. I'm a bigger guy, so like running takes a lot out of my joints, particularly when you're lifting weights. So like I was kind of managing that intensity at the same time, or managing that running volume, knowing like the most important thing is that I stay injury free. Like I don't pick up Achilles tendons, like plantar fasciitis, but that kind of stuff that is easy to happen when you just bump your running volume up too much. So I would still do my 2 swims, 2 runs, 2 bikes, maybe another run, and then I would have probably a squat, bench, deadlift session. I probably would make, so as in like 1 squat, 1 deadlift, 1 bench session, and I would probably continue to deadlift once a week. I would probably squat twice a week, and I would bench 3 times a week.
This is as well as that Ironman, or is this pre-Ironman?
No, as well. Yeah.
Okay. So
maybe bench 2 times a week.
And I think that's going to be an amazing process for you to kind of really dial in your programming philosophy and principles, because it's such a hard challenge.
Really hard.
There's not so much room for error. Will you still have this linear periodization approach, Will you take a reactive approach? Will you have tests built into the program throughout?
Yeah.
What will they look like?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it will be, it probably won't be that much testing. I'll probably have like, I think it's going to be more like strength maintenance. So it'll be like flirting around like 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, maybe even some singles, but it's like, it will be just like the volume will be super low on that as well. And it's just like almost trying to just maintain like, it's going to be hard over a 6-month period. I'd need to have like, I haven't really thought about it that much, but it would probably be like maybe 3 months of strength maintenance and then 3 months of maybe like trying to peak it again a little bit and just get better at practicing the heavy single. Like we were talking about before, like the ability to just like I could probably, if I practiced more heavy singles, I'd probably be able to get close to a 200 kg back squat, which is like a lifetime goal of mine to be able to hit. But like, it almost feels like cheating in a way if I literally just practice singles. Like I kind of want it to come up from like, 8s and 5s and 3s in a way. Do you know what I mean? With like, you just do the single itself, like by being so specific with powerlifting. I still want to be able to hit like a 200k back squat and to rep out like 180 for 5, rather than it being like, on a good day when the stars align, I can hit 200 for 1, but on a bad day, I've got like 175 for 1.
But that's normal. Every single person has that. The room for error is like 20 or 30% with the 1 rep max. It's crazy. So that's normal. You'll have that anyway. But,
well, yeah. I mean, basically, what I want is for it to not be my only thing where it's just a 1 rep max. Like I want to still be like that, to be a top end, it not just to be like a one-off occurrence type thing. It's like, it's almost like I can hit that 200 and I can keep doing it.
Yeah. Okay. So along the way, like say it's how are you going to know that you are on track to hit these numbers? What are your KPIs going to be?
I think I would. Yeah, I'm not sure. I need to think about it, because like I'd have to decide how my strategy is going to be, because I haven't really thought about it, because of like, I'm not doing it this year. But like, there could be an argument for me like practicing the heavy single, and it's me doing like work up to like maybe having 6-week peaking phases, or maybe having like a 12-week peaking phase, or maybe having 8 weeks where I'm like, it's linear. Or it might be that I just practiced almost like Bulgarian, like max out every couple of weeks or something like that.
Every day.
Yeah. Not every day, but like, and just by doing that, I know that that's almost like my testing metric, is I know that I've still got a 200 kg deadlift, or like a 210 deadlift, or on a bad day it's 200, on a good day it's 225, whatever. Or it might be that I do it very linear, and I try to, and I go back to phases of lower intensity strength into higher intensity strength, and try to build back up to it. Because I guess the argument is then like the potential stress on not central nervous system, joints, of like doing like heavy singles, and like the injury risk of like you doing that regularly, versus like the difference between me trying to pull 225 off the floor versus me pulling 180 off the floor. Like, it's very different in terms of how I could fuck myself up, kind of thing. So I'd have to think about that as well. It would be really going to be challenging, like you say, to figure out what that program looks like. And I don't know if there are many people that I would confide in to like try to get inspiration from.
In this, I mean, it's good actually you have a year, because you could literally fuck around and find out this year, which I think is actually a really good approach to programming generally. What would it take actually to change your mind on linear periodization?
Nothing. I'm keen. I'm keen to like the reason why I have to. I don't have to, but like if I'm writing the game program, I feel like I have to do it.
But for your independent, for your individual stuff, for this goal.
Well, I would still be trying to keep as many of the gain elements as I could in it, but yeah, okay. So nothing. No, there's nothing stopping me from taking less of a linear approach to it. Yeah, there's no reason why I wouldn't. I guess it's like you talk about the fuck around and find out. Like I could try it this year and see whether I like it for next year. But from experience of what I've done, and I guess it's only because I've only done linear, but like I think that people sometimes overcomplicate programming. Like we were talking about where you could just keep a session the exact same for a lot of people and they would still make progress, particularly someone that's a noob. But no, there's nothing that like I would do. There's nothing that I wouldn't try, but I think that I know I would feel more confident that I would be able to hit those numbers approaching it more linearly than not. You think otherwise?
What I would do personally this year is I would figure out the impact of different rep ranges on the 3 exercises, squat, bench, and dead, and their influence on subjective feeling of joints and all the cardiovascular bits.
I think I could tell you that now.
So if you have that information already,
Yeah.
I would use that and I would figure out what is the optimal, what has the least impact on joints. And based on that, I would probably stick around that rep range and I would find a number that correlates to the 1 rep max and stick there for the entire program. So you can tick all of those boxes.
Yeah.
That would probably be my approach. I would probably not do more running. I don't think that would benefit. Just because, again, the impact on the joints and the amount of cardiovascular development you can get in the pool and on the bike, I would just double down on that fully.
But it's not my cardio that's the issue. It's not my heart and lungs, it's my pins.
So if it's the pins, what I would do instead of a running session is probably a plyometric session. And that would be something that takes you beyond the demands of the marathon to really improve the elastic qualities of your joints. As opposed to an extra running session, because I think fatigue will be the biggest issue for you to manage, because you have to manage this relationship between fatigue and stimulus. So you need, this is the biggest thing, you need information and data that you can make reactive decisions off week by week in order to increase the likelihood of success. If you're going in and relying on a 10-week linear periodization up until the end point and you don't have data with regards to like, if I hit this way, I know I can hit this way, I personally would feel like I'm shooting in the dark.
I do have that. I have that, or I kind of know that already. Like I know that I would need to triple a 175 to hit 185, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I would figure that out for like a 6, an 8, a 10.
Yeah.
And probably just stick with it there because your joints are going to be a big factor. I think that would be my philosophy. That's how I would approach it. Yeah.
When I feel the fatigue in my legs though, it's not a joint issue. It's like the amount of contractions that those muscles have had to have. So it's I still think that I completely agree. It's about managing the stress, overall fatigue, but I think that the only way that I'm going to get better at running is by doing more running sessions over the course of that training block versus not. Yeah. For me to be able to my marathon pace after having done 180 kilometers on the bike becomes a 5:30 rather than a 6:30.
Yeah, so I would disagree with that because that is a very complicated answer, and that I would say I couldn't agree with that with any degree of certainty. So, for example, your perfect amount of running volume is unsure. You don't know. Yeah. I don't know. The assumption would be adding more would be better. But as we've discussed earlier with the interference effect, with complex dynamic systems, there are only trade-offs. So if you up the running volume and maybe you subjectively feel that it's more in the muscle tissues than the joints, but that might be because your tendons and ligaments can't do the work because they don't have the elastic qualities built through something like plyometrics. So the muscles have to do more. So that's one example why adding more running might not be the answer, because you could do something like improve your efficiency with running through something like plyometrics, really develop your tendons and ligaments, intramuscular coordination, ability to co-contract between like all your different tissues to stabilize the joint, and that could yield 10x better running because that's the limiting factor. So I would fuck around and find out with regards to different things, and I personally wouldn't do linear periodization.
I disagree, but
why?
Because I think that your point that my tendons and my ligaments aren't doing is what's causing the fatigue. I think that's a big statement, when really it's probably the more obvious is that the amount of contractions that my quads, my hamstrings, my glutes, my calves have had to do over a 3-hour easy run or a 2-hour easy run is what's causing the fatigue in my legs and my legs to feel heavy, and my reason why I'm having to manage my paces, not that my tendon elasticity is what the limiter is.
Yeah, that was just a potential answer, not the answer. That's what I'm saying. It's a complex thing. So that could be one of the reasons, which is why you might want to do plyometrics. Yeah. But it was more the fact that adding more running would have massive...
It will have a massive impact. But my rebuttal to that would be that if that's the area of weakness that I see is going to have the biggest impact on my ability to bring my Ironman time down, which it is, of everything, like I don't think the increases on the bike, if you look at my rankings, so out of like 2,500 people, my swim was 1,000th. So swim's pretty shit, but to increase my swim by half an hour, I'd have to like go back 20 years and swim every fucking day as a kid. Like that's not going to happen. Like I'm probably looking at maybe like a 5 or a 10-minute increase in my swim max, because the amount of time that you spend on the swim is small. My bike, the amount of time that you spend on the bike is a lot. To put into context, of 2,500 people, I came 200th. So I'm already in that, like in the top end for my bike. I probably can't get massive gains on that, but my run was like 500-600th, and I think I can get, like, my run's not fast. Like I've done a flat marathon, not flat, it was a 800 elevation, but it was like a 350, which is a pretty 355
for that much elevation. It's decent.
I think it's an average, pretty average. I think I've got a lot more in the tank than that. Like I want at least 330 on a flat marathon. So in order for me to get that on a grade adjusted pace with that elevation on the marathon, it probably needs to be a 4-hour marathon. So that's taking off. And the marathon, when I did it, was 4:35 that I took on the Ironman. So to shave off 35 minutes off of that marathon time, I think requires more running than a 1 to 2 hour easy run and 1 interval session, which was what I had programmed. I think I need another run, as long as it doesn't impact my recovery on strength, etc. And as your point there with, I have to have data and trackables. I have to know that, like, say for example, I've done 4 weeks worth of adding in this third running session within the week, and then I get to try to triple 170, for example, and I can't do it for shit. That probably says to me that, like, there's something in there, as long as all my other variables in terms of recovery stay the same, that I probably need to adjust the running volume maybe, or something else.
What would you think would happen to your running time if you added an extra 10 minutes to your cycle?
Oh, what went slower? Yeah, definitely. Like it could have an impact for sure. It's hard to say. Like of all of the specialisms, like the bike obviously is my best, but it's like it's what I understand the most, and it's also what you can be the most data driven with. It's like power to weight ratio, power on this segment, RPMs, cadence, speed, average speed, etc. Like you have all that data in front of you on your bike computer. So I literally knew to the T what my power output needed to be on an average, what my power needed to be on certain segments, what my average speed needed to be on certain times. I think that like I executed my bike like right on without having to have any fatigue, having done 5 months of prep. The brick sessions that I'd done, how long I'd done the bike sessions, what my average power was. I think that like 10 minutes doesn't sound like that much, but like because the bike's the longest, that's where you can have the biggest influence with. And they do always say like race the bike, you pay on the run. But I don't feel like I raced the bike. I think like I came off the bike and I felt good. Well, as good as you can, having been in the saddle for 6 hours. But I get your point. I think that the argument then is that like if I take 10 more minutes on the bike, that's me going from like a 6, whatever it was, 6:15 to a 6:25. I've then got to take 45 minutes off of my marathon time, which is a lot quicker on my run.
So I'm gonna use my argument for you to get into more vertical periodization and a reactive approach to training to try and figure out a good way to figure out the problems that you're trying to solve. So I think currently you think it's the run, but again,
I don't think it's only the run, but like, yeah.
So like the run is one of the limiting factors, but you need data to make decisions off every single week. You do actually have time because you're about 20 months out from the actual event, but you need to figure out the relationship between the average wattage on the bike and the pace you can run after that.
Yeah.
That's a very complex relationship that will change every single day based on a gazillion factors you can never realize. But to have that information and make decisions off, you should, of course, you're going to keep it fixed on a week to week basis, but being reactive and measuring the outcomes on every single session and giving it RPEs, whatever, and then making decisions up until game day is probably where the answers are. To just say, I need to add more running, I think is probably, that decision needs to be based off more information that needs to be gathered first.
Well, I think that if you with the bike and the runs, the brick sessions, I definitely had that data where like we'd done some 5 or 6 hour bike and I was holding like 260, 270 average watts, and I finished that 6 hours like, how the fuck am I going to run a marathon? Whereas there are other ones where I've done like a 230, 240, 250 and been like, I feel good. And I knew that was like, I've got that. So I had that data. I guess maybe it was, I never felt like my running clicked. I always felt heavy and slow on my runs. And right now I'm running 3 times a week, sometimes 4. And I feel class. I'm not a quick runner, but like I feel quicker on my feet. I feel like my gait's better. Like I'm faster. I'm all pretty much as fast as I've ever been on my runs whilst pushing my strength. And yes, I don't need to do 4 running sessions a week, but I think managing the mileage over the week is going to be important. But I do think that there's scope for me I don't think that's my only answer, but I do think that's where I can make up a big chunk of time is by adding in another running session, but we'll see.
I mean, that makes way more sense that you figured it out, that doing 4 versus 2 currently has a really positive impact on your running outcomes.
Yeah.
Obviously, the other question is, are you cycling as much? Are you swimming as much?
No.
So it's, again, these are really, really complex questions, like, and fun things to figure out with your programming and periodization, which is why I think it's a great conversation to have, to figure out your principles so you can make the best possible decisions for moving forth with this outcome. And good luck with it. That's so exciting to see.
It's gonna be tough.
Yeah, it's gonna be fucking
Might
gross.
die. Well, I mean, it's like what's funny though is that with the training that I'm doing right now, because I'm doing a high rocks next week, the weekend after next, and that's why I've been doing 3-4 runs a week, and I haven't been doing any easy runs. I've only been doing like thresholds, tempo runs, etc. Because it's like I've spent 6 months building a base. I don't need to do that. I need to just peak in a short period of time, like a 7-week window, and I feel my body feels it already. Like I can feel like bits of Achilles and like my hips and stuff like us feeling a little bit tighter, and I know that if I did this for another 5 or 6 weeks, I'd run into some overuse injuries. So like I already know that I'm flirting on that line of like overtraining with my running right now. So it's like that's getting the response, but it's also like not a sustainable way of training, and I know that. So it's striking the balance between the two, I guess, which is going to be hard.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that like running is going well, it feels good, but you have these trade-offs, which you don't want for the Ironman.
And in 6 months of prep, for sure.
Yeah, so that, I mean, the probably the things you want to keep dialed in is you don't feel like shit, so you can actually drive some physical quality. It's really hard to drive physical qualities if you're subjectively feeling like shit, and running is by far the most intense out of those 3 domains. You can do far less running than the others,
100%,
and still drive the other physical qualities. Another one, let's say this is the last little bit that I want to talk about. So with agile periodization, it's talked about in the book. I think with PFCA, you talk about this progression of, is it motor competency?
Yeah, motor control, muscular endurance, strength endurance, absolute strength,
power, speed,
speed. Yeah, strength, speed, strength, and then absolute speed. That comes from OPEX.
And as well as you talk about the pyramid with cardiovascular fitness and health. Base of zone 2.
Yeah,
that one
kind of. I don't know if we've even got that in the handbook.
No, I mean, just I've seen on your Insta.
Yeah,
as well. So whatever, those things. So I think there's an interplay between how speed, strength, and muscle endurance influence each other, and working at certain velocities might effectively improve one more than the other, and the same goes for cardiovascular training. Zone 2 will probably, doing a bunch of zone 2 will probably improve a bunch of zone 4, and vice versa. There's an interplay between them all.
Yeah, sure.
It's kind of like, do you agree with that? And what's your thoughts on that?
I do. I think that it's the base has more of an impact on the top than the top has more of an impact on the base. I do agree that there's definitely there's crossover and carryover from you doing speed strength or strength speed would have some role potentially in your muscular endurance or your motor control, and doing some threshold work would potentially improve your zone 2. Well, I think that's a bit clearer, actually would improve your zone 2, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we should do it. Like, particularly with the people that I work with, like, they don't need to do any power. They don't need to be doing power cleans. I don't think they could be doing some plyometrics for like like we talked about, like tissue health, joint health, but I don't think that they need to be doing like power cleans. They could get everything that they need from some form of like hip extension if their goal is athletic performance. How much do they need to do that if they want to be able to run a 5K without stopping, look better naked, and be healthy? Would they be better off spending more time doing like on their precious 4 times a week that they make it into the gym, sometimes 3? Are they better off doing some low level aerobic work and a bit of strength and a bit of bodybuilding? Or are they better spending 15 minutes of that time doing like power cleans at the start of the session? I would say no. But for other people, like if we're talking about improving athletic performance and things like that, I definitely think there's a lot more cross between the two. I think it depends on who the it's a gay question, but it's like depends who, like it depends. It's a bad answer, but it's like it depends on what the goal is.
Yeah.
So like I don't think everyone should be training power or speed. I don't think everyone should be training their like anaerobic fitness, like their anaerobic power, like 10-second echo bike sprints. I don't think people need to be doing that. I don't think everyone needs to be doing that. I think that a lot of people can do that, but I think that in general, you start from the base and you build it up, and then if you have elements of fitness that you want to work towards or certain outcomes that you want from a performance perspective, then yeah, add them in, but I don't think that everyone should be doing them.
For general health, general population and their general health, where do you feel like higher velocity movements have their place? Would you keep that in your members' programs if you see them in person? Things like plyometrics and like higher velocity, like upper body movements, throwing balls.
Yeah, I think they're good. I think that they, in terms of the hierarchy, I would have them like as a priority, like right down. So I would have them like, I would include them potentially for someone that's got like a decent training age, but I definitely wouldn't start. I wouldn't have, like someone who's never been into the gym before in their life. I wouldn't spend time with them doing plyometrics and throwing balls and deep yielding whatever, like to start off with. There's no like she can't, like she's at a stage where she's holding a ring to squat because she hasn't got the leg strength. So how the fuck is she going to do like a deep yielding plyo? Like she's not going to get anything out of it. So you're better off, spending the first however many months or years getting them to develop motor control and muscular endurance and an aerobic base before we start doing assault bike sprints or anything, or like pushing a sled fast, because you can't get the stimulus out of those without having built some form of a base. Like if you tell me that your Gen Pop client that's been training with you for 3 months that's never been into the gym is going to get the right stimulus out of assault bike sprints, I say you're wrong. Like they can't express power to be able to train their anaerobic system. It's just going to be an aerobic system response the whole time.
Or they'll die.
He might die from stress.
It's so intense. Yeah, I think I'm generally on the side of we don't really know still what the best approach is for getting certain outcomes. And I think tendons and ligaments are left behind a lot with regards to what most people are doing in gyms across the world. And I think...
Are they left behind though? Or are they getting worked well through strength training?
They're getting worked well, but they are being left behind, in my opinion. So I think like throwing a ball quickly and jumping around a bit has a very positive impact on general health outcomes and general physical qualities. And I think that is missing and can be included in most people's programs with very little trade-off that's negative.
I would agree, other than the amount of time that they spend doing those versus other potentially more bang for your buck things that they could be doing, i.e. more they hit more muscle groups over the course of the week. If you've got a client who's only 2 times a week, and of that 2 hours worth of training that you do with them, 30 minutes or 20 minutes is spent on plyometrics on their upper body and lower body, and their training age is low, I would say you could spend that 20 minutes or 30 minutes better. But that's me.
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different opinion. I think generally it doesn't take that much time, and because we don't have all the answers, it leaves less room with error with regards to leaving things on the table. So like coordination between muscle tissues and joints,
Co-contractions, yeah,
that kind of thing, and just like the ability to kind of create stiffness at joints and accept force and produce force at a variety of velocities is exceptionally valuable for most people.
Is it though?
Yes.
But like, how many? If you've got a Karen, when is she going to be experiencing any form of high velocity? Other than which, like, she's going to run for a bus. She's still not doing as high velocity as if she was doing some pogos. Like,
I think it's the ability for a joint to take a lot of force in a short period of time happens when we least want it to, when we're falling over and catching ourselves.
True.
Particularly in old age, having those kind of skills is essential for maintaining your health. It's something like, if you're above the age of 65 and you break your hip, your life, you've got 5 years to live, effectively.
No, I for sure.
So with regards to putting mechanisms in place that can protect yourself, that take 10 minutes a week total to do, the trade-off is worth it. The time investment is worth it for this, as well as it might have a positive impact on strength outcomes. It might have a positive impact on aerobic system. I think we have these viewpoints that what we're doing now is strength endurance. What we're going to do later is power. I think those things are much more interspersed than independent, and therefore we don't really know exactly the interplay between the different characteristics that we're working on. Therefore we should just try and keep a little bit in, because it might help. You don't know. And
do you think that, like, how much plyometric training were you doing 2 years ago?
Actual specific,
fuck all, right?
Calling it plyometric, 0. But was I running at high velocities? Yes. Was I jumping off of things? Yes.
Yeah. I think it's just people are just wanking over plyometrics at the moment, and I agree that I think they're great, and I personally have used them, and I think they're class. But I also think that they're the trendy thing right now, and people are obsessing over them when they don't need to. I think that I completely agree they have a time and a place, and you can drive great outcomes from them. I would still argue that Karen's 2 full body resistance sessions a week, she doesn't need to do. Going back to your point of like ability to like recruit fibers or to stop herself falling, like she's going to be working her fast twitch muscle fibers by doing like lower rep strength training just as much as she is from doing high velocity. So like you can get similar if not more intramuscular force doing heavy strength work close to failure as you can when you do fast contractions. The reason why you don't build muscle is because it's not enough time in that force velocity relationship for you to have the cross bridging to do it, but you can still generate similar amounts of force. So if she has to contract quickly by stopping herself from falling, if she's doing some form of heavy, which is relative, strength work, I think she probably still be able to do it.
Yeah, I think you will develop the muscle tissue, and that'll be absolutely fine. But I do think there is an argument to develop stronger tendons and ligaments, just because of there's so much issues with that across the gym population and the general population.
Yeah.
And this this kind of high velocity work does significantly more stimulus for tendons and ligaments than traditional hypertrophy training or strength training.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, and like, I think the perception is you need to do 20 minutes. I think everyone warms up. Instead of bullshit stretching, throw a ball, you will get more loose and your body will warm up and you'll work your tendons. And then you can do some jumping. It literally takes less than 5 minutes. So the trade-off is very low and the outcome is worth it.
To kind of agree with you, that's exactly what I do. And what I program in the game program. They're doing split stance leaps, like med ball squats, like throwing the ball against the wall, like tall around the world ball slams, all of that stuff. So they're doing exactly that. I'm just saying that, like, for there's certain people, if we're talking about trade-offs or time, I think they'd be better off not fucking around with that if they're more of a noob. But like, I wholeheartedly agree. And if I'm thinking about my demographic within Gain, those people that are training, they're probably going to come into tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, knee tendonitis or tendinopathy, because they're pushing weights but they haven't got the tendon strength, or the muscles aren't doing what they need to in the chain for those muscles to take the load, and the tendons are having to do more work, or the joints are having to do more work. So I agree with what you're saying sometimes.
It just depends on the population. Yeah. So who isn't it? If you've got like 30 minutes twice a week, then they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, if they've got like,
Well, it's so it's more like it depends on what exercises you're talking about. Like, if I'm thinking about, like, literally this week, I put in split stance leaps into the warm up in the gym for our class, and had to adjust that for 4 or 5 people in a class of 20, because they literally haven't got the strength to be able to do a bodyweight split squat. So how are they going to be able to get any benefit out of a split stance leap or a deep yielding plyo or whatever it is? They're probably just better off doing a split squat when they warm up, and then working up to a goblet squat in their training or whatever it is. But then they might be able to get some benefit out of doing a med ball slam, because you can adjust it or progress it a little bit easier and have them doing a 3 kg ball. But even then, they probably haven't developed the motor control or the muscular endurance to be able to contract their tissues hard enough to throw the ball at any velocity that would exceed the intramuscular force if they were just lifting weights. Anyway, those are the people that I'm thinking about that would be the exceptions, like the people that just haven't got the strength, the same people that I wouldn't program 15-minute echo bike sprints, because they just can't express that anaerobic power to the same extent as someone that had done 2 years worth of aerobic base building and working at threshold intensities.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, for me, that's not, do you do it or not? It's more finding the right way to do it for the person. So everyone should do it. It's just meeting them where they're at. What are they capable of? Obviously, that's so much harder in a class because you've got 20 people versus one. It's a much different problem to try and solve. But yeah, I think we both agree that generally those things should be in a program.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Pizza?
Yeah.
Let's go. That was I don't know how long that was. Mate, that was fun.
1:15. We probably started at 10:15, right?
Do you reckon it's 3 hours?
3 hours. Nice. That was Joe Rogan. I need a piss.